Hey family, welcome back to my video. Today we will see What if Harry Potter and the Night with Luna Lovegood? Part 2 before we start. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the original author of this story for granting us permission to use it in our YouTube video. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. The author's creation and the original story's link in the descriptions. Please do check that first. Now enjoy the video. Tom Marvolo Riddle, also known as the Dark Lord, Lord Voldemort. You know who must not be named, Lord Thingy, and Snickerdoodle, the last only during pillow talk between himself and the recently late and largely unlamented Bellatrix Lestrange, looked up into the blazing emerald green eyes of the man who defeated him. You think you've won, but you haven't, Potter. Harry Potter's wand tip continued to pulse with a bright purple light as it leached the magic from Riddle's core. Yeah, I know, Tom. You cannot be defeated. You are invincible, and you will crush me, have me driven before you, and enjoy the lament of my women. Blah, blah, blah. I cannot die. I am immortal. Believe me, I know. Potter said in a conversational tone. Trying to find your Horcruxes was a major pain, let me tell you. It was lucky that Lucius Malfoy delivered your diary to us when I was 12 so that I could destroy it and find out about your little keepsakes. Dumbledore found Salazar's ring and destroyed it. Regulus Black stole Salazar's locket from your hiding place by the sea and hid it in his ancestral home. And I asked the Hogwarts house elves to search the school for any items related to the founders that you might have hidden. They found Ravenclaw's diadem in the room of requirements. Imagine that? I destroyed the diadem and the locket with the sword of Gryffindor just yesterday. You just saw Nagini die. Fool! Riddle gasped. That's just 5. I made 6-inch. Actually, the blonde witch in the Ravenclaw robe said as she came up alongside Potter and wrapped her arm around his waist. You made 7 Horcruxes. Rather sloppy of you to have missed that. The brunette witch in Gryffindor robes continued. I can't imagine how one could manage to create a Horcrux and not notice, but you did. Harry's scar, the blonde continued. It cost several thousand galleons and a front-page ad in the Quibbler, but Mambo Laveau of New Orleans removed your soul fragment from Harry's forehead and placed it in this doll. The brunette took the small figure from the Ravenclaw and held it in the palm of her hand. The figure began to flail before it burst into flame and was reduced to ash almost instantly. A dark mist issued from the ash, and a faint scream was heard as the soul fragment died. Oops. Then there was Hufflepuff's cup. You actually got sneaky with that one. The large boy in the Gryffindor robes said. I had to track down and kill Bellatrix so that I could go the goblins and claim her vault by right of conquest. I mean, I was going to kill her anyway, but still it's the principle of the thing when I went to all that trouble and the only thing in her vault was a booby-trapped replica of the cup. Once we figured out that you had dropped the stupid teacup somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, things got a lot easier. The tall redhead boy in Gryffindor robes continued. That meant we couldn't just kill you. An evil grin spread across his face. So, we had to get creative. You'll never find it. I've won. Riddle gloated from the ground where he laid. Time is on my side, Potter. Sooner or later your attention will waver, and I will be free. We're not even going to look for it, Tom. The red-headed girl said. I mean, why bother? As long as your body is intact, you can't do the spectral spirit walk thing again. So, we just keep you alive and confined. You can't hold me, you fools. I'll escape, then you will all die. That's sort of the plan, Tom. Only you've got the order backwards. Potter said, smiling, finally lifting his wand, Riddle's core having drained completely. We will all die, and then you'll escape. Then I hunt down your children and their children until your lines are extinct. Ah, Tom, the brunette said, shaking her head. That was always your problem. You think too small. She pulled a vial from an inside pocket of her robes. The young woman knelt next to Riddle's exhausted form and poured the liquid into Riddle's mouth. A look of horror crossed Riddle's snake-like features. He recognized the scent of the potion as it took effect. The draft of the living. Death. Riddle jerked awake. What was happening? Everything was shaking. A deep rumble filled the air. Where was he? Was this an earthquake? Riddle dimly recalled what you were supposed to do in an earthquake from his time in Persia on his first search for power. He tried to sit up, but found that he could barely move. Riddle struggled against his body's weakness. The walls actually shifted, and a jagged hole appeared in the wall to his immediate left. Red-tinged sunlight beamed into the darkness of the room. The shaking stopped, along with the rumble. Riddle lay where he was panting from the effort of trying to move. Suddenly, a rune-generated image filled the room. "Hello, Tom." The image coalesced to show a much older Harry Potter. "How are you feeling, Potter?" A raspy whisper escaped from Riddle's lips, sounding odd even to his own ears. What had Potter done to him? "Relax, Tom. It will be a while before you can move. Your magic has been powering a stasis charm for a very long time now, and operating this chamber from the bottom of a played-out coal mine to the surface probably drained you dry. It will take your core a bit, while to fill to the point where you will regain muscle control." The image of Potter smiled. "A whole lot of thought went into your incarceration, Tom. You should be honored. Really, you should. My wife and several of my friends spent the better part of 50 years on making sure you could have your immortality and choke on it. Consider this our gift to you. The fact that this recording is being played shows that it all worked. If it hadn't, other recordings would be played." The image shrugged. "Even with magic, how well our gift works is pretty much a crapshoot. There are just too many variables to consider. What if there comes a point where your magic no longer regenerates? What if someone finds you?" Again, the image shrugged. "I don't know how much Muggle science you remember from your primary school days, Tom. But as I'm recording this, they estimate the Earth to be just over 4.5 billion years old, and project another 5 billion years until it is swallowed by the sun as it becomes a red giant." Potter smiled. "Cool, huh? I wish you could have seen what the Muggles have done, Tom. Permanent bases on the moon, 2 missions to Mars, one on the way to Ganymede, a robot probe to the closest star. Really cool stuff. Anyway, if this all worked and everyone did their jobs correctly, you should be waking up to the Earth 2.5 billion years into the future from my point of view. Once core of the planet has cooled to the point that it can't maintain the Earth's magnetic field any longer. And once that field collapses completely, a process they tell me might happen overnight or take centuries, all kinds of interesting radiation will be hitting the planet, slowly eroding the atmosphere and irradiating the hell out of you, assuming, of course, that the current science is correct. The first beginning of the collapse of the magnetic field will open your crypt, again, assuming that your magic lasts that long." The image of Potter smirked at him. "Humanity as you knew it is almost certainly gone. While there may be life, you undoubtedly won't recognize any of it. I would be careful how you got about treating the natives where you find yourself, Tom. They may well be capable of making your immortality unpleasant." Riddle struggled to move, to speak, and to do anything that would allow him to prove to himself, if to no one else, that Potter was lying. Doing so exhausted the Dark Lord to the point that oblivion claimed him. Once Riddle woke, he found his muscles screaming in pain at their lack of use. He brought a trembling hand to his face to wipe something from it. It was then he noticed the cord wrapped around his wrist and trailing off the bed. "You're awake then?" Potter's image smiled at him. "Just a few more thoughts, and I'll let you get on with your immortality. I've left you your wand. I couldn't just send you off into eternity unarmed, could I? My friend Hermione. You remember Hermione, don't you, Tom? The Muggle-born which you took such an interest in via Draco Malfoy. Hermione suggested that even with the stasis charm, your wand might not survive the long sleep you've enjoyed. So I preserved it." Riddle managed to sit up. He began to pull on the cord that ran from his wrist over the side of the bed. "Your wand is connected to the cord around your right wrist, Tom, sealed in a block of a Muggle substance called Lexin." Riddle pulled a clear block onto his lap. In the dim light that came through the crack in the wall, he saw his wand suspended in the center of the hard, transparent substance, 4 inches on a side and 18 inches long. His wand, so close, yet he could not touch it. "We secured it to your wrist so that you wouldn't lose it. Of course, you might have a bit of trouble getting it out of the Lexin. Well, good luck, Tom. Enjoy your immortality, such as it is. Assuming you can survive the radiation, you've got 2.5 billion years or so until the Earth is destroyed. Good luck with that." The man in the image grinned one last time. "I wonder what will happen to your soul wraith when the sun consumes the planet." Potter's laughter rang out before the image faded out. It took hours before Riddle deemed himself ready to try to exit his crypt. Hesitant exploration found that lights came on in the room as soon as he stood from the bed. Once he had lights beyond the red glow that came in from the hole in the wall, Riddle found a water cask under heavy preservation and the preserved makings of 3 meals. Riddle ate and drank, and then he noticed that the red light coming in from the hole in the wall had faded. That suggested that it was now nighttime. Did he dare leaving the relative safety of this crypt to explore in the dark? No. Best to remain here until the light returned. The darkness had always been his friend, hadn't it? The darkness had hidden him from the older boys in the orphanage. And then the darkness provided a safe place from which to exact his revenge on the powerless. The dark had allowed him to explore Hogwarts Castle, finding even Salazar's near mythical chamber of secrets, hidden for centuries from the small-minded fools that had filled the school since the banishment of the greatest of the 4 founders. He would remain in this chamber until light. Riddle spent several hours trying to remove his wand from the block of Muggle material. He beat the block against the platform he had woken upon. He swung it by the cord that connected the block to his wrist, slamming it against the chamber's walls repeatedly. His frustration rose when, after all, that he hadn't even managed to chip the transparent material. Riddle crested the hill, hoping against hope that he would finally see some indication of food or drinkable water. He didn't. Just more the same leg-killing hills that covered the landscape clear to the horizon in every direction. More than 5 years. The minute scratches that he had made on the tree branch that he had fashioned into a walking staff to assist in his travels came to a count of 1913. 1 for each day. That was something else that had changed. A day was longer, a lot longer, than it used to be. He wasn't sure why, but it was. Of course, he had no way of actually telling time. The sun, huge and swollen in the sky, seemed to slowly crawl across the sky. And the nights went on forever, with nightly auroras that dwarfed the displays he had seen while on a trip to Norway early in his first rise to power. But this endless land, wherever he was, had to be further south, as hot and humid as it always was. But he couldn't even estimate his latitude, given that on the rare night the sky cleared of clouds and the auroras cleared enough to let him see the stars. He didn't recognize any of them. Look as he might, there was not a single familiar constellation in the sky. Then there was the absence of the moon. Where was the moon? He had pondered that many of the insanely long nights over the last 5 years. Potter had said that the Muggles had bases on it, whatever they were. Surely they couldn't move the moon, could they? Movement caught his eye. Yes, there. It had been 2 days since he had eaten, and these small burrowing creatures were the only animals larger than insects he had managed to get close to in the entire 5 years he had been awakened to the so very changed world. Carefully, Riddle started his stalking of the creature, cursing for the 100th time that day the transparent prison his wand remained stored in. The creatures were odd, slightly larger than a European brown rat, but utterly without fur. They had toothless beaks and an odd, leathery texture to their skin. They were not mammals as he knew them, nor birds, nor reptiles. And they tasted horrible. There was only one way to make the beasts taste any worse, and that was to cook the meat, as Riddle had learned through experience when he had caught and cooked the first one. He had been deathly ill for 3 days. Of course, taste wasn't all that important, really. Riddle raised the squirming creature to his mouth, and using the snake aspect of his homunculus body, unhinged his jaw and set about the slow process of swallowing the beast whole. Riddle crouched in the back of the shallow cave he had found, thankful for it as he peered past the small fire he had started for the night at the torrential rains outside. Despite the discomfort, the rain was a gift from the heavens. Riddle hadn't found water in 4 days. The small bowls he had fashioned from some particularly waterproof leaves had already filled. Riddle drank his fill before setting the bowls back out to refill. He dug into the pouch he had made from the putrid carcass of some unidentifiable beast. Whatever it had been, it was huge. In all his travels, Riddle hadn't even seen one of these mountains of meat live, but had found several dead, but never soon enough to supplement his diet. He used what was left of the beast to make himself clothing, including shoes of a sort, 3 times now. From the light of the fire, he inspected his footwear. Hopefully he would find another soon. Ah, there! From the pouch he drew out the sharpened stone he had found his second day, out of the chamber Potter had left him in. Carefully he etched a small line into his walking staff. 1914 days since he had become the absolute master of this world. absolute master. Riddle began to laugh. Potter had been right. The immortal reflected through his laughter. Potter had given him his immortality so that he could choke on it. The world was almost devoid of life, and life was the source of magic. Where before Riddle had celebrated his power, now he hardly had enough magic available to him to start the fire in front of him. His wand that might have made a difference was still sealed in the block of muggle material and connected to his right wrist, though in reflection of 5 years of his effort with the sharp stone, one surface of the block was scored and pitted to a depth of perhaps 1/8 of an inch. The laughing man shook his head. When Potter hated, he did it in style. Riddle was a wizard with almost no magic. Riddle was a ruler without followers. Riddle was a sadist with no one to torture. All thanks to Potter and his followers. Riddle sat back trying to ignore his hunger. Just when was it that immortality had lost its attraction? This would be his new base. From here, he would hunt the burrowing creatures until he depleted the local population, just as he had so many times before. A week, perhaps 2, then he would have to move on. He would likely always be moving on. After all, forever was an exceedingly long time. A slash in the last. The whole pursuit of immortality never seemed to be all that sensible to me. I don't think Tom really thought through what he was doing. Plotting with potions, a slash in. I own none of this. I do not own Harry Potter or any rights to his image or personality. I do not own the moon or the stars. I do not own human genders, other than my own personal original factory equipment. Honest? Nope, not me. I most certainly do not own the rights to a billion-dollar literary work. Plotting with potions. The hardest part had been setting up the potions lab. For obvious reasons, they couldn't use Snape's labs or his ingredients. Now that it was set up and the ingredients ordered via owl post via the twins, the pair hovered over their cauldrons in anticipation of the completed brew. He was rubbish at potions, his participation limited to preparing the ingredients under her watchful eye and handing them to the girl as she asked for them. Her potion skills were top-notch, impressing even Snape, a skill she attributed to her mother. Not trusting the twins' wonder which line, due to the ready availability of antidotes, they had elected to brew their own. The frozen Ashwinder eggs, which were only the most volatile of the ingredients, had just been added to the 2 cauldrons. Exactly on schedule, the potions went from milky white to the shimmering mother of pearl the text spoke of. Then they each added a vial of their own blood, the keying agent. All it would take was a single taste. Perfect. It had been 4th year when he had decided he wanted her, right after he missed his chance with her for the Yule Ball. He had spent the dance staring at her from a distance, hating every moment she was in the other man's arms. Deciding it a lost cause, he had tried to date others, but it always came back to her. For the young woman, it had been the trio's 5th year when her crush blossomed in a full-blown lust and an all-consuming need. The smell of his body when he came off the Quidditch pitch soaked in sweat, glances shared during meals before they separated to go to their classes. Night after night, she called his name as she touched herself, her secret only kept by the silencing charms on the drapery of her 4-poster bed. Everything was ready. They had planned their trap, so very carefully coinciding with a Hogsmeade weekend. Her mouth went dry when she caught sight of his unruly hair as he entered the 3 broomsticks. It was all she could do to keep from rising to her feet and leaping into his arms. Too soon, too soon. Be calm, she told herself. You've waited this long. A little longer. He rose to his feet and greeted his best friend and the target of his desire. As they had planned, he put the proper bottle of butterbeer into his friend's hand. He ignored the guilt he felt at doing so. It was for the best. Really it was. He smiled as he saw the proper bottle being raised to her lips, the lips he dreamed of. The lips that would belong to him. Finally, it took only 4 minutes for their plot to reach its completion, when her man reached across the table and hesitantly took her hand. It worked. He was hers. Choke on that lavender. Oh, Harry, she breathed in his ear, as he allowed his hands to roam in the darkened corner of the pub. Their lips met in the darkness, and he imagined he could taste the potion. He looked up, catching Hermione's eye as she broke the kiss with Ron. She winked, signaling success on her end as well. It worked. Both of them had what they wanted. No longer would they be outsiders looking in. Now they would be part of a pure blood clan with the partners they wanted. Perfect. The accountant's gravel. A/N. I do not own Harry Potter, nor any of the other characters or situations associated with Harry Potter, or much of anything else. This so-called story is particularly silly and probably should not be read by anyone at any time, ever. In fact, allowing your children to read this is most likely classified as child abuse in most states. But then if you've ever read any of my stuff, you already know that. Harry Potter and the Accountant's Gravel Chapter 1. The boy who scammed. Vernon and Petunia Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive would have been proud to say that they were good people if they were the kind of people who spoke of themselves in such a way, which they were not. Thank you very much. The neighbors all knew that the Dursleys were the last people you would expect to be involved in anything conventional or mundane because they held themselves to higher standards. Vernon Dursley was the executive director of an international charity called Touchstone, which did good works and helped people. He was a tall, thin man with long auburn hair that he tied in the back into a ponytail, calloused hands from pitching in whenever anyone needed any help, and he held the absolute certainty that he was everyone's friend. Petunia Dursley was shapely and blonde, and had the kind of face that caused other people to stop and stare with awe. For several years prior to meeting the love of her life, Petunia had worked in high fashion as a model. Though she loved what she did and appreciated the platform her fame had offered her for her good works, she had given it all up without a second thought when she became pregnant. So, 2 became 3 when the happy Dursleys welcomed their small son, who they named Dudley, to this world. 16 months later, and the 2 loving parents were confident in their opinion, there was no finer boy anywhere. The Dursleys knew they were leading charmed lives, and that they had everything they wanted, but they also had a secret sorrow, and their greatest fear was it would never be resolved. They did not think they could bear it if anyone found out about the Potters. Mrs. Potter was Petunia's sister, but they had not met for several years. In fact, Lily Potter pretended she did not have a sister because Petunia and Vernon were as un-Potterish as it was possible to be. The Dursleys wept when they thought about how the Potters thought of them. The Dursleys knew that the Potters had a small son, too, but they had never even seen him. This boy was another reason that kept the Potters away. They did not want their son mixing with a child like Dudley. When Mr. and Petunia woke up on the bright sunny Tuesday our story starts, there was nothing about the crystal-clear blue sky outside to suggest that strange and mysterious things would soon be happening all over the country. Vernon hummed as he picked out his favorite cardigan for work, and Petunia sang a happy song as she lifted a giggling Dudley into his high chair. None of them noticed a large, tawny owl flutter past the window. At 8:30, Vernon picked up his handmade satchel, kissed Petunia in that passionate way that always left her breathless, and lifted his only son for a hug that the smiling boy enthusiastically returned. "Little tyke," chortled Vernon as he left the house, making his way to the bus stop where he began the first part of the chain of public transportation that took him to work each day in the most environmentally responsible way possible. It was on the corner of the street that he noticed the first sign of something peculiar, a cat that appeared to be reading the map on the bus stop enclosure. For a second, Vernon didn't realize what he had seen. Then he turned to look again. There was a tabby cat standing on the corner of Privet Drive, staring at the bus stop enclosure. But surely it wasn't actually reading the map, was it? Vernon Dursley laughed at himself. What could he have been thinking of? It must have been a trick of the light. Vernon blinked and stared at the cat. It stared back. As Vernon boarded the bus, and it drove around the corner and up the road, he watched the cat through the bus window. It now appeared to be reading the street sign that said Privet Drive. No, it was just looking at the sign. Cats could not read maps or signs. Vernon laughed at himself again and put the cat out of his mind. As the bus drove toward town, he thought of nothing except a large shipment of order of relief supplies he was hoping would be delivered to the survivors of that horrible earthquake today. However, on the edge of town, the earthquake survivors were driven out of his mind by something else. As he sat in the usual morning traffic jam, he could not help noticing that there seemed to be many strangely dressed people about. People in cloaks. Vernon felt a tingle of excitement at the sight of people who dressed to suit themselves. You could always count on young people to try new and exciting things. He supposed this was some new fashion. Vernon hummed to himself, and as the bus stopped at a traffic light, his eyes fell on a huddle of these free thinkers standing quite close by. They were whispering excitedly together. Vernon was excited to see that a couple of them were not young at all. Why? That man had to be older than Vernon was, and wearing an emerald green cloak. Vernon silently cheered the man on. It was always inspiring to see a man going his own way in life, conventions be damned. Then it occurred to Vernon that this was probably some sort of stunt. This many people were obviously associated somehow, possibly somehow connected to a movie or something. Vernon shook his head sadly. Yes, that would be it. Once again, the Hollywood elites were pretending to care about things to sell tickets to another of their movies. The traffic moved on, and a few minutes later, Vernon arrived at the Touchstone offices, his mind back on the plight of earthquake survivors. Vernon always sat with his back to the window in his office on the 9th floor. If he had not, he might have found it harder to concentrate on the perils of the world that morning. He did not see the owls swooping past in broad daylight, though people down in the street did. They pointed and gazed open-mouthed as owl after owl sped overhead. Most of them had never seen an owl, even at nighttime. Vernon, however, had a perfectly normal, owl-free morning. He wrote letters of recommendation for 5 different people. He made several important telephone calls and arranged to feed thousands. He was in a very good mood until lunchtime, when he thought he would stretch his legs and walk across the road to buy treats for his office staff from the organic bakery. He'd forgotten all about the people in cloaks until he passed a group of them next to the bakery. He eyed them excitedly as he passed. He did not know why, but they aroused his curiosity. This bunch was whispering excitedly, too, and he could not see any indication as to what movie they were advertising. It was on his way back to his office past them, clutching a large bag of whole wheat bagels for the office, that he caught a few words of what they were saying. The Potters, that's right. That's what I heard. Yes, their son, Harry. Vernon stopped dead. Concern flooded his mind. He looked back at the whisperers as if he wanted to say something to them, but thought better of it. Surely not. He dashed back across the road, hurried up to his office, gave his executive secretary the baked goods to distribute, and asked that he not to disturb for the next quarter hour. Vernon picked up his telephone and had almost finished dialing his home number when he changed his mind. He put the receiver back down and stroked his chin, thinking no, he was being silly. Potter was not an unusual name in the slightest. He was sure there were many people called Potter who had a son called Harry. Come to think of it, he wasn't even sure his nephew was called Harry. He had never even seen the boy. It might have been Harvey or Harold. There was no point in worrying Petunia. She always got so upset at any mention of her sister. He did not blame her if he had had a sister who wanted nothing to do with him. But all the same, those people in cloaks. He found it a lot harder to concentrate on arranging for the delivery of relief supplies that afternoon, and when he left the building at 7 o'clock, he was still so worried that he walked straight into someone just outside the door. Oh, so sorry, Vernon effused, as the tiny old man stumbled and almost fell. It was a few seconds before Vernon realized that the man was wearing a violet cloak. He did not seem at all upset at being almost knocked to the ground. On the contrary, his face split into a wide smile, and he said in a squeaky voice that made passers-by stare, "Don't be sorry, my dear sir, for nothing could upset me today. Rejoice, for you know what has happened at last. Even muggles like you should be celebrating this happy, happy day." And the old man hugged Vernon around the middle and walked off. Vernon stood rooted to the spot. He felt the warmth that came from having been hugged by a complete stranger. He also thought he had been called a muggle, a term that seemed faintly familiar. Slightly bemused by the happenings of the day, Vernon hurried to his bus and set off for home, wondering if he was imagining things, which on reflection caused him to smile. It was good that he still had to wonder if his imagination was running away with him. So many of the suits in this world had lost the knack, and Vernon suspected that they did not really approve of imagination. Walking up the street to his lovely home and family, the first thing Vernon saw was the tabby cat he had spotted that very morning. It was now sitting on his garden wall. Vernon was sure it was the same cat. It had the same markings around its eyes. "Hello, puss," Vernon said kindly. "Keeping an eye on things, are we?" The cat did not move. It just gave him a stern look. Vernon smiled. That was what he loved about cats. They did what they did for their own reasons, and, as a group, they didn't give a damn about what anyone thought about it. Thinking about his loving family, Vernon let himself into the house. He was still determined not to mention that he had heard anything about someone named Harry Potter. He did not want to upset his lovely wife. Petunia Dursley had had a wonderful day. She told him over dinner all about the proceeds garnered at the church jumble sale, of the dedication of the new dialysis ward at the hospital, and how Dudley had learned a new word, please. Following Petunia's wonderful meal, Vernon washed the dishes at the sink, and then read Dudley his favorite bedtime story, Hamster Huey and the Gooey Kablooey, complete with the funny voices that always made the tyke giggle uncontrollably. After Dudley had settled into his normal blissful sleep, Vernon went into the living room in time to cuddle on the sofa with his loving wife and catch the last report on the evening news. And finally, birdwatchers everywhere have reported that the nation's owls have been behaving very unusually today. Although owls normally hunt at night and are hardly ever seen in daylight, there have been hundreds of sightings of these birds flying in every direction since sunrise. Experts are unable to explain why the owls have suddenly changed their sleeping pattern. The newscaster allowed himself a grin. Most mysterious. And now, over to Jim McGuffin with the weather. Going to be any more showers of owls tonight, Jim? Owls? Petunia sighed in that way that told Vernon that she was once again mourning the loss of her relationship with her sister. Well, Ted, said the weatherman from his place before the map on the telly, I don't know about that, but it's not only the owls that have been acting oddly today. Viewers as far apart as Kent, Yorkshire, and Dundee have been phoning in to tell me that instead of the rain I promised yesterday, they've had a downpour of shooting stars. Perhaps people have been celebrating bonfire night early. It's not until next week, folks, but I can promise a wet night tonight. Vernon sat frozen in place on the sofa. Shooting stars all over. Britain? Owls flying by daylight? Mysterious people in cloaks all over the place? And a whisper about the Potters. This was no good. Vernon knew he would have to say something to Petunia about his suspicions. He cleared his throat nervously. Air. Petunia, love, you haven't heard from your sister lately, have you? As he had expected, Petunia looked sad and more than a little wistful. After all, it was her dream that someday her younger sister would come back to her life. No, she sighed. Why? Odd things in the news, Vernon mumbled. Owls shooting stars, and there were quite a few people wearing cloaks in town today. Ah, Petunia said understandingly. Well, I just thought maybe it was something to do with, her crowd. Vernon continued. Petunia sipped her wine quietly. Vernon wondered whether he dared tell her he had heard the name Potter. He decided he would not risk upsetting her more. Instead, he said, as casually as he could, their son, he'd be about Dudley's age now, wouldn't he? Yes, about a month younger, said Petunia wistfully. What's his name again? Howard, isn't it? Harry, Petunia murmured. A nice, unpretentious name, wouldn't you say? Oh, yes, said Vernon, his heart sinking. Yes, I quite agree. Vernon did not say another word on the subject as they went upstairs to bed. While Petunia was in the bathroom, Vernon crept to the bedroom window and peered down into the front garden. The cat was still there. It was staring down Privet Drive as though it were waiting for something. Vernon laughed at himself for imagining things. After all, how could this have anything to do with the Potters? The Dursleys got into bed, Petunia falling asleep quickly, but Vernon lay awake, turning it all over in his mind. His last, comforting thought before he fell asleep was that if the Potters were involved, then perhaps, just perhaps, Lily and Petunia could rebuild their relationship. Again, Vernon laughed at himself. He knew very well what James and Lily Potter thought of him. He hoped that Petunia would not get hurt again by whatever might be going on. Vernon yawned and turned over. It could not affect them. How very wrong he was. Vernon Dursley might have been drifting into sleep, but the cat on the wall outside was showing no sign of sleepiness. It was sitting as still as a statue, its eyes fixed unblinkingly on the far corner of Privet Drive. It did not as much as quiver when a car door slammed on the next street, or when two owls swooped overhead. In fact, it was nearly midnight before the cat moved at all. A man appeared on the corner the cat had been watching, appeared so suddenly and silently you would have thought he had just fallen out of the sky. The cat's tail twitched and its eyes narrowed. Nothing like this man had ever been seen on Privet Drive. He was tall, thin, and very, very drunk. An old man, judging by the silver of his hair and beard, which were both long enough to tuck into his belt. He was wearing long electric blue robes, a purple cloak that swept the ground, and high-heeled, buckled boots. His blue eyes were dull, bloodshot, and mostly closed behind half-moon spectacles, and his nose was red, very long and crooked, as though it had been broken at least twice. This man's name was Albus Dumbledore. Dumbledore did not seem to realize much of anything. Not that he had just arrived in a street where everything from his name to his boots were quite remarkable. Not that he was slightly older than dirt. Not that he had just trod in the residue from someone's uncurbed dog. He was busy rummaging in his pockets, apparently looking for something. However, he did seem to realize he was being watched because he looked up suddenly at the cat, which was still staring at him from the other end of the street. For some reason, the sight of the cat seemed to anger him. He glared and muttered, "Damned cat. Staring at me like that. Why, I oughta—" Dumbledore found what he was looking for in his inside pocket. It seemed to be a reddish rectangular prism. He hefted it, held it up in the air, and flung it through the nearest street lamp. As soon as the street lamp's bulb went out with a crash, the reddish item returned the old man's hand. Again he hurled the device, and the next lamp imploded into darkness and a shower of glass. 12 times he threw the half-brick, until the only lights left on the whole street were 2 tiny pinpricks in the distance, which were the eyes of the cat, watching him. If anyone looked out of their window now, even a curious Vernon Dursley, they would not be able to see anything that was happening down on the pavement. Dumbledore slipped the half-brick back inside his cloak and set off down the street toward number 4, where he sat down on the wall next to the cat. He did not look at it, but after a moment, he spoke to the feline. "Can't I go anywhere without you staring at me disapprovingly, Professor McGonagall?" He turned to leer at the cat, but it had gone. Instead, he was waggling his eyebrows at a rather severe-looking woman who was wearing square glasses exactly the shape of the markings the cat had had around its eyes. She, too, was wearing a cloak, a tartan one. Her black hair was drawn into a tight bun. She looked distinctly ruffled. "How did you know it was me?" she asked. "My dear professor, when is it ever not you? It's not as if I have been with you all day while you worked your way through your normal case of scotch," said Professor McGonagall. "All day? I assure you, madam, I waited until after 2 p.m. before I began my libations. I am surprised you have not been tying one on. I must have passed a dozen feasts and parties on my way here." Professor McGonagall sniffed angrily. "Oh yes, everyone's celebrating. All right," she said impatiently. "You'd think they'd be a bit more careful. But no, even the muggles have noticed something's going on. It was on their news." She jerked her head back at the Dursleys' dark living room window. "I heard it. Flocks of owls, shooting stars. Well, they're not completely stupid. They were bound to notice something. Shooting stars down in Kent. I will bet that was Daedalus Diggle. He never had much sense." "You can't blame them," Dumbledore slurred drunkenly. "It's just the sort of thing you celebrate." "I know that," said Professor McGonagall irritably. "But that's no reason to lose our heads. People are being downright careless. Out on the streets in broad daylight. Not even dressed in muggle clothes, swapping rumors." She threw a sharp, sideways glance at Dumbledore here, as though hoping he was going to tell her something, but he did not, so she went on. "A fine thing it would be if, on the very day James and Lily won the lottery, the muggles found out about us all. Do you suppose there really has gone, Albus?" "It certainly seems so," said Dumbledore. "They have much to be thankful for. Would you care for sex on the beach?" "What? Sex on the beach?" the old drunk said, pulling a large flask out of his robes. "It's a kind of muggle mixed drink I'm rather fond of," the old drunk said, carefully not mentioning his kickbacks from the Rot-Fawn conspiracy. "No, thank you," said Professor McGonagall coldly, as though she did not think this was the moment for the man to get even more soused. "As I say, even if you know what has been won, my dear professor, surely a sensible person like you can call the game by its name? All this, you know what nonsense, for 11 years I have been trying to persuade people to call it by its proper name, Gallons of Galleons." Professor McGonagall flinched, but Dumbledore, who was adding scotch to his sex on the beach, seemed not to notice. "It all gets so confusing if we keep saying, you know what? I have never seen any reason to be frightened of saying the game's name." "I know you haven't," said Professor McGonagall, sounding half exasperated, half admiring. "But you're different. Everyone knows you're the only one who has ever won, all right, the game. You flatter me, said Dumbledore slurred. The game's current jackpot had come to amounts of cash that I will never have. Only because you drink so much of it away. It's lucky it's dark, the old drunk said after a rumbling belch. I haven't blushed so much since Madame Malkin measured my inseam and got a little grabby. Professor McGonagall shot a sharp look at Dumbledore and said, "The owls are nothing next to the rumors that are flying around. You know what they are saying? About why they left him behind. About what they did with him." It seemed that Professor McGonagall had finally reached the point she was most anxious to discuss, the real reason she had been waiting on a cold, hard wall all day. For as a cat nor as a woman had she fixed Dumbledore with such a piercing stare as she did now. It was plain that whatever everyone was saying, she was not going to believe it until Dumbledore told her it was true. Dumbledore, however, was taking another hit on his flask and did not answer. "What they're saying," she pressed on, "is that last night after the Potters were told that they had won the game, they immediately set out on a world tour, and that when they found out that they couldn't check young Harry, and they left him at the airport. The rumors say that Lily and James Potter abandoned little Harry." Dumbledore bowed his head. Professor McGonagall gasped. "Lily and James. I cannot believe it. I did not want to believe it. Oh, Albus." Dumbledore reached out and patted her on the shoulder. I know, he said heavily. Professor McGonagall's voice trembled as she went on. "That's not all. They are saying the Potters backed over little Tommy Riddle after he had delivered the cash is non-sequential unmarked small denomination bills. No one knows why or how, but they're saying that when he couldn't stand up, Riddle's body somehow broke, and that's why he's gone." Dumbledore nodded glumly. It's true," faltered Professor McGonagall. "After all he's done, all the people made deliveries to, he couldn't get out of the way of their old banger of a car? It's just astounding of all the things to stop him. But what in the name of heaven will Tommy survive?" "We can only guess," said Dumbledore. "We may never know. I, for one, don't care." Professor McGonagall pulled out a tartan flannel and dabbed at her eyes beneath her spectacles. Dumbledore hacked up a great glob of mucus as he reached for his golden watch, only to remember too late that he had pawned it. Too bad. It was a very good watch. It had 12 hands that all pointed to 5 o'clock and played the theme songs of several prominent distilleries. The old drunk shook his head sadly, and then looked up. "Hagrid's late. I suppose that's due to my instructions to him to keep young Harry occupied for 24 hours before bringing him here." "What?" Professor McGonagall asked. "Why the hell did you do that?" Dumbledore shrugged. "It seemed like a good idea at the time. Anyway, I've come to bring Harry to his aunt and uncle. They're the only family he has left now." "What the hell are you talking about?" "Harry is related to half the magical families in Britain." The Scots which pointed out. "True enough. However, James owes most of those families money, and the ones that don't hold Potter debts have met the boy and know what a miserable little shit he is." McGonagall jumped up and down while pointing at number 4. "Dumbledore, you can't. I've been watching those people all day. They're a bunch of fucking hippies. You could not find 2 people who are less like us. In addition, they have this son. I saw him playing in the living room, and then getting up without being asked to help his mother fold the laundry. At less than a year and a half. You cannot have Harry Potter come and live here. He'd eat them alive." "It's the best place for him," said Dumbledore firmly. "His aunt and uncle will be able to explain everything to him when he's older. I've written them a letter." "A letter?" repeated Professor McGonagall faintly, sitting down on the wall. "Really, you think you can explain all this in a letter? These people will never understand him. He'll be a burden, a drain on their resources, a pain in the ass." "Exactly," said Dumbledore, looking very seriously over the top of his half-moon glasses. "It has to be done via a letter." The old man shook his head. "Otherwise they might say no. Think how much better it will be, with him growing up far away from us until we can't avoid it any longer. There is a chance I'll be ready to retire before he comes to Hogwarts." McGonagall mused. Yes, you're right, of course. But how is the boy getting here, Dumbledore?" She eyed his cloak suspiciously, as though she thought the old pervert might be hiding Harry underneath it. "Hagrid's bringing him." "You think it wise to trust Hagrid with something as important as this?" "I would trust Hagrid with my life," said Dumbledore. Only because he makes your booze runs for you without charging a premium. I'm not saying his heart isn't in the right place, said Professor McGonagall grudgingly. But you can't pretend he's not dangerous. He just tend to— What was that? A sharp clattering had broken the silence around them. It grew steadily louder as they both looked up and down the street for some sign of the source. The clattering swelled to annoying levels as they both looked up at the sky, and a small pink bicycle with a white wicker basket hanging between the handlebars fell out of the air and landed on the road in front of them. If the bicycle was small and effeminate, it was nothing to the man sitting astride it. He was almost a third as tall as a normal man and at least 1/5 as wide. He looked simply too small to be allowed out on his own, and so refined. One look at him told you that he enjoyed fine wines, Italian shoes, and preferred the company of men. In the basket of the bicycle was a bundle of blankets. "Hagrid," said Dumbledore, sounding relieved. "At last! And where did you get that bicycle?" "I liberated it, my dear Professor Dumbledore, sir," said the tiny man, climbing gingerly off the bicycle as he spoke. "Young Angelina Johnson will discover she loaned it to me in the morning," the small man said with a smirk. "I've brought him, sir." "No problems, were there?" "No, sir. I picked him up at the lost luggage claim at Heathrow, as you asked. Then the little bastard pissed all over my Bruno Maglis. That almost caused him to accidentally fall out of the basket as we were passing over Bristol." Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall bent forward over the bundle of blankets. Inside, just visible, was a baby boy, fast asleep. Under a tuft of jet black hair over his forehead, they could see a curiously shaped cut, like a bolt of lightning. "Is that where?" whispered Professor McGonagall. "Yes," said Dumbledore. "He'll have that scar forever." "Couldn't you do something about it, Dumbledore?" "Even if I could, I wouldn't. Scars can come in handy. I have one myself above my left knee that is a perfect image of all the answers for the 1853 nude exams." "Well, give him here, Hagrid. I'm starting to sober up, so we'd better get this over with." Dumbledore took Harry in his arms and turned toward the Dursleys' happy home. Could I smack him around a little, sir?" asked Hagrid, his small hands balling into fists as he advanced on the small bundle. "Of course not," hissed Professor McGonagall. "You can't just beat a child out in public like this. You'll just have to come back later and find him when he's alone. Besides, you'd wake the muggles." "Sorry," Hagrid said, shaking his head. "It's just James owed me 50 galleons, and now I'll likely never see it." Yes, it's all very sad, but get a grip on yourself, Hagrid, or we'll be found," Professor McGonagall whispered, slapping Hagrid on the back as Dumbledore stepped over the low garden wall and walked to the front door. He laid Harry gently on the doorstep, took a letter out of his cloak, tucked it inside Harry's blankets, and then came back to the other two. For a full minute, the three of them stood and looked at the little bundle, Hagrid's shoulders shaking in near rage. Professor McGonagall blinked furiously, calculating how much she would need to save in order to successfully retire prior to 1991, and the red glow that usually shone from Dumbledore's nose seemed to have dimmed. "Well," said Dumbledore finally, "that's that. We have no business staying here. We may as well go and join the celebrations." "You're buying," McGonagall said. "Yes," said Hagrid through clenched teeth. "I best get this bike away to the pawn shop if I want to hock it before it's discovered to be missing. Good night, Professor McGonagall, Professor Dumbledore." Wiping his stained shoes on Harry's blanket, Hagrid swung himself onto the bicycle's banana seat, and leaning back against the sissy bar, kicked the pedals into motion, starting the spokes slapping against the Dumbledore chocolate frog card, and with a clatter, he rose into the air and off into the night. "I shall see you soon, I expect," Professor McGonagall said. Dumbledore, nodding to her. Professor McGonagall glared at him suspiciously in reply. "Remember, you're buying." Dumbledore turned and walked back down the street. On the corner, he stopped and took out the half-brick and giggled manically. In the distance, he could make out a tabby cat slinking around the corner at the other end of the street. He could just see the bundle of blankets on the step of number 4. "Good luck, Dursleys," he murmured. "You're going to need it." He turned on his heel, and with a swish of his cloak, he was gone. A slash in the last. "This is a stupid idea that came to me during a long drive home due to highway construction. At one point, it was going to be one of those the cast show up to tell the author what she got wrong stories with Draco being the perennial victim, an all-around nice guy. abused by the callously evil. Harry, the hyper-aggressive in-your-face Hermione, and the studious, fastidious Ron. A friendship bonded when Hermione drags Harry to save Ron from the troll that Harry led into the castle. Ron was in the toilet crying because Hermione bitch slapped him when he corrected her pronunciation of Wingardium. I'm not sure if I'll ever come back to this one, but if I do, I'll introduce the staff and show Harry's life with the Dursleys, the band, /in. I don't own Harry Potter and wouldn't particularly care to. I would like a rental agreement with option to buy for Hermione Granger. A short-term contract with Nymphadora Tonks wouldn't be turned down. A long-term agreement with Luna Lovegood would probably be a whole lot of fun. Anytime Padma Patil wants to open negotiations, call me and O for a weekend with Fleur. Oddly, Lavender and Padma's sister, despite being her twin, Parvati, do nothing for me. The band. I found Harry sitting in the common room staring at the fire. It had been a bad night for me. Lavender informed me in no uncertain terms that while she was willing to explore my tonsils with her tongue, she was a nice girl and didn't do anything more than that. I thought that this was patently unfair because her reputation said quite specifically that she did do more than that. And if her reputation was a lie, then that was false advertising, wasn't it? I, of course, didn't say that out loud. I mean, I might not be the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I'm not stupid. Besides, the snogging was good if not fulfilling. No sense spoiling a good thing. Anyway, I found Harry in the common room, staring at the fire. "Hey," I said as I fell into the overstuffed chair next to him. "Oomph," he grunted. Now, Harry can be a moody bloke, but that's a bit much, even from him. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Bored," he answered. Now that was unusual. Harry can be a bit much at times. I've seen him frightened, angry, happy, soppy, whiny, excited, drunk, and occasionally, as when he got to thinking about Cho, the tornado's loving skank, Chong last year horny. But never bored. What the hell? Hermione's still angry with me over the Prince's Potions text. He continued, "That's nothing. You should see what she tries to do to me, anything we end up alone." I protested, unable to resist a bit of one-upsmanship with my best friend. "But Harry, there's still Quidditch." "Don't care. I always catch the snitch at the last second to save the game, unless Dominis show up, and I only have to worry about that at Hufflepuff games due to Dominis being rabid Puff fans for some reason, and we've already played the Puffs this year." I sat and stared at him for a moment while trying to digest his theory that Dominers might be Hufflepuff fans before I continued. "Well, what about Malfoy and his plots, or Voldemort and his? That should get your attention," I suggested. "Nah," he said with a dismissive hand wave. "They're not going to actually do anything until late May. That's 6 months away." "How do you know that, Harry?" "Ron," he said pityingly. "All the attempts on my life or major plots come to a head in late May. Haven't you been paying attention?" "Well, what about Snape?" "Snape," Harry said once again staring into the fire, "is an ass. He's always been an ass, and likely always will be an ass. The only way he could possibly be worse is if I were to find out that he's been wanking off to my mother's memory. And frankly, the mere thought that I could imagine such a thing is disturbing all by itself. Snape bores me." Okay, I thought hard trying to come up with something that Harry couldn't be bored with. I had it. "What about your special training with Dumbledore?" "That couldn't possibly be boring." "You have no idea, Ron," my best friend said sadly. "Dumbledore's special training has consisted so far of watching home movies of Voldemort growing up and an assignment to get a memory from Slughorn, which I won't be able to do until some specific and unspecified point in the future. God, I'm bored. I've even done all my homework for the month. That's how bored I am." Harry's last admission took me aback. No one should ever be that bored. Surely I could come up with something that would give Harry back his interest in life. Looking around the common room, I spotted a fourth year, strumming a guitar, surrounded by a silencing charm and a small herd of lower-form girls all looking at him in worship. "I got it, Harry. We could form a band." "Form a band?" Harry seemed confused, though a glimmer of hope appeared in his eyes. "Why?" "To celebrate the freedom of artistic expression and to unleash our inner muses." I explained to his vacant expression. "Nah, I'm messing with you, Harry. Blokes form bands because bands pull birds, and everyone knows that." Harry's eyes glazed for a moment at the thought of forming a band. Or was it pulling birds? No matter, After a very few moments, Harry began shaking his head. It won't work, Ron. I don't play any instruments. Not a problem, Harry. There are charms to teach you to play. A grin spread across Harry's face. That was the moment that Ron Weasley and the Ron Weasley Experience, starring Ron Weasley, was born. What are you two grinning about? Harry and I looked up to find Neville Longbottom staring at us suspiciously. We just formed a band, Harry said happily. A band? Neville asked. Why? Well, obviously to celebrate the freedom of artistic expression and to unleash our inner muses, I explained. And mostly to get girls, Harry added. Ah, Neville grinned. As long as there's a good reason. A thought struck me. Two guys seemed a bit skimpy for a band. Oh, sure, there was that muggle group Hermione liked so much called Whim, or something with a song about waking someone up before going somewhere twice. But it seemed to me that more guys in the band would mean more groupies. So, Neville ever thought about being in a band? The question seemed to surprise Neville. Well, granted me taking piano lessons before I started at Hogwarts, but I wasn't very good. Don't worry about that, I assured him. There are charms that let you play well. There are? Neville asked in surprise. Count me in then. What's the band's name? Ron Weasley and the Ron Weasley Experience, starring Ron Weasley, I explained. Oh, very funny, Harry said, chuckling. Yeah, Ron, you're a riot, Nev agreed. What's the real name of the band? I was silent, amazed at their reaction to the best band name ever. You're not kidding? Neville finally asked. I for one refuse to be in a band called Anyone's Experience or that stars anyone. Harry said, Well, how about the Chosen Ones? I suggested. You know I can hurt you badly, don't you, Ron? Harry asked in that scary way of his. He fixed me with his patented, I'm going to kill you and everyone who looks like you glare, and then spoke again. How about we call ourselves Constant Vigilance? Oh, I like that, Neville agreed. Could it be Constant Vigilance starring Ron Weasley? I asked. No, the other two chorused. Well, that was hardly fair. What are you two going to play? Neville asked. The kazoo for me, I said confidently. What? Harry asked. Really? Neville seemed shocked. You're really going to play the kazoo? Wicked. I know, I admitted. Back when Bill was in a band, he played the kazoo, and he let me try a few times. Bill said I was a natural. Whoa. Neville was obviously impressed. Harry, of course, couldn't let me have my moment in the sun. Wait a minute. You guys are making it sound like a kazoo is a serious instrument. You're messing with me, aren't you? Harry, Neville said with a flash the rage I felt. Never disparage the ultimate Merliton. Doing so makes light of all we are and all we will be. The immortal kazoo is the source of all music magic. Harry looked back and forth between Neville and me, looking like he thought we were joking. I know, he's muggle-raised, but he's lived in the magical world for almost 6 years now. He's got to start learning our ways. Okay, fine. Neville on the piano and Ron on the kazoo. He grinned as if he had decided to join in on a joke. I guess I'll play the triangle. Neville gasped, and I felt my own heart skip a beat. Harry, I hissed. Don't even joke about that. Do you want to go to Azkaban? What? He asked. The triangle? Neville hissed. The triangle is the instrument of choice of Dark Lords throughout time. It's evil. They're used for torture and dark rituals. There are rituals that would give a triangle the power to kill with a single ting. Just possession of one of the accursed things is an instant one-way trip to Azkaban. But we used them in primary school. Harry protested. We know. That's one of the reasons the more conservative purebloods hate muggles so much. I explained. Because of the triangle? Harry, Neville protested. So, we're a trio? Harry asked. Neville settled into his normal seat in the corner of the common room. I don't know, Harry. It seems to me that most of the successful groups have at least 4 members. I sat next to Harry on the sofa. Well, who do we know that's cool enough to jam with us? Harry turned and looked at me oddly. Cool enough to jam with us? Well, we don't want anyone pulling our appeal down. I explained. Well, Neville suggested. Ginny would probably play with us. She's cool. My sister is not going to be on stage with us. She'd sabotage me any time I was making my move on a groupie. Your move? As in singular? You got one move? Harry laughed. Well, Dean once said he played drums. Neville said, What's this about me? Dean called from across the room. Dean, Harry called. Come on over for a minute. Dean closed the book he was reading and came over to join us, slumping in the chair opposite Neville. What? We're forming a band, Harry said, and Neville said that you played the drums. A bit, Dean admitted, but I'm not very good. No worries, I told him. There are charms to let you play. There are? Dean asked. Then why aren't there hundreds of bands? Neville and I shared a look. Muggleborns, what are you going to do? Mostly because no one has ever thought of this before. I explained gently. Wait, Harry interrupted. If no one has ever thought of using magic to make their music better, why are there charms to allow you to do it? Ancient charms, Harry. Ancient charms that I have access to because my brother is a curse breaker. Okay, Dean said in that way he does when he doesn't really believe what he's been told. So what's the name of this band anyway? If a band is going to pull birds, it needs a cool name. Constant Vigilance. Neville said, starring Ron Weasley. I added, no. Neville and Harry chorused. Just Constant Vigilance, Harry continued, not starring anyone. Forming a band was my idea, I pouted. And it was a good idea. Neville said, a good idea that we're not going to let you spoil with a stupid name. Before I could protest this besmirching of my great idea for a band name, the air chilled as an aura of doom and common sense moved to engulf our group. And what are you four up to? Oh, hi Hermione, Dean said smoothly. Not much, we're just talking. She hummed in a distrustful manner. I looked up to find her staring at me in that way that told me that she was angry with me and wanted me to die slowly and painfully. In the face of this, I cowered in a manly manner, all the while pleading to the gods and Merlin that she didn't get mad enough to start with the violence again. I'd only just managed to scrub the bird crap from my hair from the last time. You had all best have done your homework before wasting time in conversation, she said before she flounced off. Whatever it is you guys did, Neville said quietly, you'd best apologize soon before she does something we'll all regret. Well, yeah, Dean said. You know, it occurs to me, the Constant Vigilance will only work for a name among people who know. Professor Moody, I think we'll need a name that isn't such an in-joke. Like what? I asked. Well, some of the more popular Muggle bands just have nonsensical names. You know the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Wham. Weird names. I agreed. What were you thinking of for a name? Well, Dean grinned. Where's Trevor has a certain ring to it. Oh, I like that, I grinned. Funny guys I hang out with. Neville sighed. No, Nev, that's a good name, Harry laughed. It will have people asking, who is Trevor? Something that generates interest like that has to be good. Neville made a face. I've got to get going. Professor Sprout is expecting me in Greenhouse 4. I'll join you, I said standing. I promised Lavender that I'd meet her in the Great Hall for a walk around the lake before dinner. See you two later. Don't worry about an instrument, Harry. My dad has a Muggle instrument that you can use. I'll get him to send it to me. As Neville and I passed through the doorway to the hall outside the common room, a thought occurred to me. Hey, Nev, we could be Where's Trevor starring Ron Weasley? No. 3 days later, Harry, Neville, and I were at breakfast and involved with most of our year at the table wondering what Slughorn would be covering today, when the owls made their morning entrance. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted an owl carrying a large package, turned and examined the approaching bird more closely. Yes, it was Errol with a package. It must be Dad sending his Muggle instrument for Harry. Poor old Errol misjudged his approach to the table. The package hit the table directly in front of Parvati and Lavender and slid past me, finally coming a stop between Harry and Neville. In the process of this sliding, all of the plates were knocked into the laps of the people eating from them. Meanwhile, poor Errol tumbled down the table, finally coming to rest face down in a large serving platter of scrambled eggs. That bird is a menace, I said, reaching over the debris on the tabletop to disconnect the package from Errol's twitching talons. What I asked that? Parvati asked, brushing residue of her breakfast from her robes. Harry's instrument. Ron, Harry said. Instrument? Lavender asked. Oh yeah, we're forming a band. I explained. I'm playing the kazoo. Really? Lavender asked again, wrapping her arm around mine. You never told me you played the kazoo, she cooed. Oh yeah, I've been playing for years. Ron, Harry repeated, tugging on the sleeve of my robe. Quiet, Harry. I whispered to my best friend who always gets everything and is trying to bump me out of the limelight. Well, Parvati interrupted. What instrument is Harry going to play? I cut the string holding the package closed with a knife from my table service, and then pulled the brown wrapping paper off, revealing an ivory keyboard and leather bellows. My pal Harry is going to be the rhythm accordion of the group. Rhythm accordion? Harry asked. You're expecting me to play a bloody accordion? Harry, I said in a calming tone. After the kazoo, the rhythm accordion is the most important instrument in a magical band. It is? Of course it is, I said, winking at Lavender and Parvati, causing them to giggle as they gathered their things to leave to prepare for their first class. Dean slid into the seat across from me. There you three are. I thought of something this morning in the shower while I was trying to shove soap in my ears. Neville's brow furrowed. Why were you trying to shove soap in your ears? Because Ron was in the next stall, singing his head off. He looked at me apologetically. Sorry, mate, but your singing might strip paint, but it won't pull birds. Oh, hell, Harry opined. None of us can sing. And what might this oddly shaped package contain, Mr. Weasley? A much-hated voice came from over my shoulder. I turned to face Snape, his eyes boring into mine. Harry said he could look into your mind, but I never noticed anything. It's an accordion professor. We're forming a band. A band. Neville and Dean started edging away. Bastards. I wished I could go with them. Yes, sir. You and Potter? Yes, sir, and Neville and Dean. Huh. That'll teach them to try to abandon me like that. I see. He seemed to hesitate for a moment. I expect your performance to be entertaining, or I shall be docking you 50 points each for wasting everyone's time. Yikes. I maintained eye contact with the great greasy git. Yes, sir. He started to leave. Then again, he hesitated. You know, I played accordion in a band when I attended Hogwarts. You did, sir? Yes. We were a talented quartet with quite a following. What were you called, sir? I asked, despite hoping he'd just go away. We were Severus Snape and the Severus Snape Experience starring Severus Snape. Perhaps you have heard of my band? Ah, no, sir. What the hell? How did he get away with stealing my idea? Are you mentioned in any of the books in the library? Maybe we should look your band up for inspiration. His eyebrows lifted. I had gone too far. The only thing worse than standing up to Snape was sucking up to Snape. I'm sure I wouldn't know Mr. Weasley. Might I suggest you care for your owl before it manages to drown in the scrambled eggs? He whirled about and stalked away, doing that rogue thing he does. I reached over, then pulled Errol from the platter. There was silence for a few moments, then Harry began to giggle. Dean and finally Neville joined him. Before very long, they were all laughing to the point they were starting to slip from their seats. What? I demanded. The Severus Snape Experience? Neville gasped between fits of laughter. Starring Severus Snape. Dean agreed. Are you sure your hair's really red there, Ron? Harry added, showing himself willing to kick a mate when he was mortifyingly down. Or does Snape dye his? Oh, very funny. Okay, Dean said as we all met in the common room after classes ended for the day. We still need a singer. I can sing. I said. No, Ron, you can't. We've all lived with you since first year. Harry shook his head. And you can't carry a tune in a bucket. Since I came up with this great idea, it had been nothing but abuse and insults. I resolved right then and there that once we hit it big, I was going solo and leaving these twits who were holding me back. Well then, what are we going to do? Neville asked. Well, obviously we need to find a singer. Harry said. Any suggestions? How about Seamus? Not unless we want to specialize in Irish ballads and drinking songs. Dean said, shaking his head. Seamus is a mate, but his interests are somewhat narrowly focused. Well, any other GRYFFS who can sing? What about what's his name that fourth year with the guitar? No, not Cooper's Neville. He's strictly a poser looking to score on the younger girls. Dean said negatively. Harry interrupted. Isn't that what we're trying to do? Well, yeah, but we're sophisticated sixth years, not a smarmy fourth year. Dean said decisively. Okay, I don't think we've got any singing male GRYFFS. Do any of the girls sing? I asked. Both Lavender and Parvati sing like angels, but that's not what we want. Why not? Harry asked. That's obvious, Harry, Neville interrupted. Girl singers would attract male fans. We don't need or want male groupies. Other than Colin, of course. I snarked. As long as Harry's in the band, he's a given. Fuck you, Weasley. The elder of the Creevy brothers called from the other side of the common room. If Ron and Colin are quite finished with their flirting, Dean said, shaking his head. I dug through my magazine collection, trying to figure out what the common denominator was with lead singers of successful bands. Your magazines have articles? I asked incredulously. Not many, Dean admitted. But enough. It seems to show that the lead singer tends to be the bad boy type. A bad boy? Harry asked. So, we need a bad boy? Yeah, pretty much. Harry sighed. Okay, come on, Ron. Let's go recruit the bad boy. Wondering what he had in mind, I dutifully stood and followed him from the common room. I followed Harry to the great hall, wondering what he was up to. Upon entering the hall, he looked about and spotted who he was looking for. Malfoy, Harry called. A moment of your time. What do you want, Potty? The Slytherin git drawled. Seriously, what's with all the Slytherins drawling? The only one I've never heard drawling is Crabbe, and I've never heard him speak. Look, Draco, this year sucks. It's the 6th time we've done this dance, and it's getting old. What are you talking about, Scarhead? Harry shook his head. You've been disappearing for hours on end, and when you're around, you're panicked and full of angst. You're not having any fun this year either. I don't know what you're talking about. Look, Draco, we both know that whatever you're up to, you can't do it until late May. Why not take a couple of months off and have some fun? I suddenly realized that Harry was right. Malfoy was looking bad. What are you suggesting? Malfoy asked. We've formed a band. We need a bad boy singer for all the girls to get the screaming thigh sweats over. You're a bad boy. All the girls watch you all the time. Look, take a break from your project. Whatever it is, come join our band. We'll all get laid, and you can try to kill me in May. What do you say? Wait a minute. I protested. I don't think. Of course you don't, Weasley. Why try something new? Malfoy turned his attention back to Harry. I won't betray my father or his master. No one is asking you to. All I'm asking is that we all get together and have some fun with this band. You'll dazzle the girls. We all get some. Greg Goyle interrupted. Could Vinny and me get in on that? We could be roadies. Why not? Harry shrugged. If we don't have anything heavy for you to carry around, we'll make something. How about a Draco? You in? I could see the temptation pass across Malfoy's face. With visible effort, he fought it down. Why would I want to align myself with you, Potter? Well, girls love guys in bands, especially the singers. If you take a break, and this works out, we all get a little, life will be good, and you can try to kill me in May when you'll be much more relaxed. If it doesn't work, then you haven't lost anything. How many girls are we talking about? Draco asked. And the roadies get the ugly ones, right? Goyle wanted to know. However many you charm with those looks and your singing. Harry explained before turning to Goyle and nodding yes. Again, Malfoy hesitated, and then visibly came to a decision. I'm in, Potter. You want me to sing? Yeah, I explained. Are you any good? Can you carry a tune? You'll have to wait to find out, won't you? When's the next practice, Potter? We all gathered in an unused classroom. Between Dean and Neville, they had levitated a piano and a drum kit into the room, and I had showed Harry how to hold Charlie's accordion. He made a few experimental attempts to play while I assure him that the music charm would give him a level of expertise. Draco made an entrance like a star, having found a pair of sunglasses from somewhere. He wore his jacket over his shoulders over a blood-red shirt and shiny black leather trousers and dragon hide boots. He was closely followed by Crabbe and Goyle, both in muggle blue jeans and black t-shirts with rhodey emblazoned across their chests. What the hell, Malfoy? I asked, just getting into character, Weasley. After all, if I'm going to be carrying this so-called band, I'd best look the part. There was a bit of generalized grumbling at the arrogant git's words, but I decided that as the leader of the band, I needed to put my foot down. All right, everyone, we're supposed to be trying to have our first rehearsal, not sniping at each other. Is everyone ready? I looked around the room and saw a general acceptance and indications that they were indeed ready. I raised my wand and cast Ludo Lacertosis. A pulse of magic filled the room. It was kind of tingly and in a good way. What the hell was that, Weasley? Malfoy asked. Just a charm to enhance our playing. I explained. Ready, Dean? You start us off. Dean started a basic rhythm beat on his drum kit. After a few seconds, Neville joined in on the piano, And then Harry gave Dad's accordion a squeeze, and for the first time actually produced some music as opposed to the horrific noise of his earlier practice sessions. As I raised my kazoo, that I had named Ruby, to my lips it occurred to me that we hadn't actually agreed on what song to play, yet the other three had somehow gotten together to play my favorite song. With the first notes from Ruby, musical nirvana was obtained. We sounded fantastic. Take that, Malfoy. So you think you're going to have to carry this group, do you? I wondered if the blonde git even knew the words to the tune. He'd better, I thought, or we go looking for a new singer. Malfoy took a deep breath and exactly on cue cut loose with the most magnificent voice I had ever heard. The song we were playing was the Weird Sisters ballad from the previous year. If I can't have you, I'll run naked through the Dragon Preserve covered in Barbie K-sauce, and I have to admit that Draco owned that song. Hell, we all owned that song, even the 9-minute drum solo. We all stood there in shocked silence after the last notes of the song were played, the quiet finally broken by Neville's bloody hell. Yeah, Harry agreed. Bloody hell. He looked at the accordion in his arms before continuing. That's one hell of a charm, Ron. We were all great. I know, I agreed. Especially you, Malfoy. I never dreamed that you would be so talented. Malfoy was just looking around the room with the same look of amazement that the rest of us shared. No, it was you guys who were great. Oh man, we're gonna get so many girls. Then a Crabbe and Goyle began clapping, the two of them looking at us reverently, and both had tears running down their cheeks. We are not worthy of being your roadies, Crabbe gasped out between bouts of sobs. Thank you for letting us hear that. Where's Trevor is going to be huge. Dean exulted. Where's Trevor? Draco asked. That's the name of the band. I explained. That sounds awfully well Muggle. Malfoy said. That's what I said. Neville said from his piano bench. Well, Harry asked, what makes a good name for a magical band? Most of them use a descriptive word, then a noun. I supplied, hoping that I could bring Ron Weasley and the Ron Weasley experience starring Ron Weasley back to the fore. You know, Weird Sisters, Orping Croops, Deciduous Forest, and of course the Flying Circus. Didn't they cross over into Muggle entertainment? Neville asked. It doesn't matter, I said, trying to steer this conversation back to the experience. We need a name that reflects what we are. Friendly enemies? Harry suggested. The Melted Cauldrons came from Neville. Salazar Soldiers. Malfoy said. Beautiful music. Crabbe offered with Goyle nodding enthusiastically. No, Dean said, looking at Malfoy and his outfit oddly. I know our perfect name. Leather Trousers. Harry grinned. I like it. Yeah, me too, Neville agreed. But it seems to be lacking something. Well, since Draco is the singer, and it's fairly common among Muggle bands to have the front man's name on the marquee, how about Draco and the Leather Trousers? Okay, I really like it. Harry agreed. Sounds good to me. Neville chimed in. How about Draco and the Leather Trousers starring Ron Weasley? I asked. No. Everyone chorused. Oh yeah, just as soon as we hit it big. I was going solo so that I could get away from all this abuse. Draco freaking Malfoy gets his name in the band name, but not Ron Weasley. Not that would be too much to ask. Bastards. So, the band was formed, and despite the crappy name, we were good, and with time and practice, we only got better. It was amazing to hear the music we made. It really was. Word began seeping out. It wasn't long before pretty much everyone in the school knew that we had formed a band. We enforced a strict band members only rule on our practice sessions. So the new groupies had to wait until we felt we were ready to perform in public to hear our music. Though that didn't stop some of them from trying to show how appreciative they might be when given an opportunity by the appropriate artist. It struck me odd how the others didn't seem interested. Harry was doing his normal solitary thing. Neville and Sue Bones were keeping company, as he put it. Dean was dating Ginny, and Draco seemed more interested in Pansy than ever. Greg, Vinny, and I, however, took every opportunity that came our way. Lavender just didn't understand, unfortunately. We went our separate ways, immediately following her finding me with a most affectionate Ravenclaw, whose name escapes me, that didn't share Lavender's concern for her reputation. In early March, Harry and I approached the headmaster about putting on a performance in the Great Hall after dinner one Saturday night. The old man's eyes twinkled furiously when he found out that Draco was part of the group. amid much praise for having united the houses we received permission to put on our show. The evening of the actual performance was long in coming. I don't think any of us ate anything that whole day, not even Draco. I'm so cool I piss ice Malfoy. Neville and Dean kept dropping things all day, and Harry was almost paralyzed in fear. I can't do this, he said. Has anyone checked to see if Voldemort wants to fight? Calm down, Harry, was my advice. Finally, the evening meal was over, and the elves had cleaned the Great Hall. All of the tables were taken somewhere, and a small stage set up where the staff table normally stood. Dean was setting up his drum kit while Harry and Neville took care to transporting the piano into place. I was busy making sure that the stage was clear of anything that might trip Draco or myself, we two being the only ones who moved about while we performed, when I was surprised by a cough. I turned to find Hermione standing behind me looking a bit embarrassed. Hello, Ron. I hear you're putting on a show this evening, she said. Yeah, I responded, wondering if she was going to sick her bird spell on me again. I just wanted to say good luck. Thanks, Hermione, I responded. I thought for a second, then asked, so, did you want to be one of our groupies? Oh, large mistake. Her face clouded, and her wand seemingly appeared out of nowhere, pointing at my crotch. Is there a problem, Miss Granger? Snape asked. How did he do that? He's always just appearing out of nowhere. Not really, Professor. I was just about to remove an offensive appendage. Hermione said, never taking her eyes from mine. As amusing as that might be, Miss Granger, I believe you should just take your seat in the audience. I have been assured that this will be a most entertaining show. Yes, Professor. Hermione lowered her wand and exited the stage. Mr. Weasley, you have an extraordinary talent for annoying precisely the wrong person, Snape said as he turned to leave. Then he stopped and turned to look at me over his right shoulder. Remember, Mr. Weasley, 50 points each if your performance doesn't entertain me. Again, he did that robe thing as he left. I decided that once I was a star, I would hire the greasy git to teach me how to do that. What did Hermione and Snape want? Harry asked as Neville and Dean approached me from behind. Well, Hermione most specifically doesn't want to be a groupie. Merlin's maiden aunt Ron. You didn't suggest that she might, did you? Neville asked, horrified at the idea. Maybe a little. I was joking. And of course, we all know how much Hermione appreciates a good joke at her expense. Dean said, shaking his head. After the show, just don't stand next to me, okay? I don't want to get caught in the splatter. Draco approached our group. Everything all right? Yeah, everything's great. I said, wondering if Hermione would actually kill me or just make me long for death. It's time. Everyone ready. There were nods all around, and everyone took their places. I raised my wand and once again cast Ludo Lacertosis. I then put my wand away and nodded to Greg Goyle. Ladies and gentlemen, staff and students, we give you Draco and the leather trousers. Vinnie Crabbe's amplified voice rang out in the Great Hall, and Greg Goyle opened the curtain that separated us from the audience. As soon as the curtain was fully open, Dean counted us in with a 4 count, clacking his drumsticks with each count, and we began to play. Neville's piano and Harry's accordion melded into a single driving pulse of music. Dean's drums set the beat for the tune. As I raised Ruby to my lips, I noted through the glare of the lights that the audience sat staring open-mouthed at what they were witnessing. Then Draco began to sing. Even after the months of practice, I still couldn't believe the power behind his voice. It was all that I could do to keep playing as he wove the story as old as wizard kind. Wizard meets which wizard loses, which wizard finds which again under a silvery moon, only to find out that she's now a werewolf and in the process of ripping out his throat. Draco was amazing, and he was singing my favorite song. Then it was time for my solo. 9.5 minutes later, we did one last round of the chorus, and the band delivered its big finish. Draco on his knees at the very lip of the stage, giving every ounce of energy his talent held. It was done. We'd finished our very first song. As the last echoes of the last notes of our song faded, the audience was silent in amazement, until Hermione stood from her seat in the first row and called out, "What the hell was that?" Then 2 things started happening very quickly. First, I heard something that I never dreamed I would, the laughter of Severus Snape. The potion's master doubled over in seemingly uncontrollable laughter. The second thing was the audience began pelting us with conjured fruit. It took the teachers almost half an hour to restore order. Well, most of the teachers, Snape was still collapsed on the floor laughing. The members of the band were covered in nasty rotten fruit residue and very confused. What was the problem? We were great. Finally, most of the students were sent off to their common rooms, leaving us facing a select few. What did you think you were doing? Hermione asked us, but I really didn't understand what was wrong. We were good. No, Ron, you weren't. You were really, really terrible, Ginny said with a smile. Something told me that I would be hearing about this for years to come. Terrible? How is that possible? Harry asked. It sounded great to me. If I might interrupt, the headmaster said softly. Might I inquire if any charms were used to enhance your performance? Well, I've been casting ludolacertosis on us to help us out. I admitted. There was silence for a second, and then Snape burst into another bout of laughter. Are you telling me, Pansy Parkinson asked, shaking her head, that you four idiots let this bigger idiot cast a charm on you that you didn't understand? It's an enhancement charm, Draco protested. It's the delusional musician charm. Hermione said, shaking her head. It tricks those it's cast on into believing that they are playing well. And evidently singing well too. Oh, Neville, Susan sighed. What am I going to do with you? I would suggest that you all get cleaned up, Dumbledore said, while I assist my disabled professor. The headmaster turned to assist Snape. Snape picked himself up off the floor, still giggling. Weasley, I sighed. Here is comes. Yes, Professor? 50 points to each member of your band, and your roadies as well. The potions master had another fit of giggling as the headmaster took his arm. I have never been so entertained as I was tonight. Bastard. Let's go, Draco, Pansy said, taking the blonde's hand and leading him away. Later, Draco. A suddenly upbeat Harry said. Don't forget, you need to try to kill me in May. Malfoy made a rude hand gesture as he was dragged away by Parkinson. Crabbe and Goyle waved as they followed their leader out the door. Susan took Neville's face in her hands and kissed him lightly, then led him away as well. Hermione looked between Harry and myself for a few seconds, and then seemed to make up her mind. Come along, Harry. We need to get you cleaned up. This left me alone on the stage, until another step from the shadows. Well, you've made a mess of things. I sighed again. I have. You seem to have burned your bridges with both Hermione and Lavender. Yeah, I agreed. And you're not likely to live this one down. I know. A sigh. Well, it's probably for the best. Let's get you cleaned up. Okay. Colin took my arm and led me from the Great Hall. I found myself wondering about his reputation. /N, well, they were a boy band. Padma, /N. I do not own Harry Potter, nor any of the other characters or situations associated with Harry Potter. Nor do I own any of the characters and situations associated with the Destroyer, or indeed the more outgoing citizens of the small North Korean village of Sinanju. But you knew that. /N too. My writing process is somewhat convoluted and utterly undisciplined. What I typically do is plot out the entire story in an outline, then plot out each chapter individually. Then I write out individual scenes as they strike my fancy. Quite frequently in mid-story, I decide to take it in a new direction because the damned actors start ad-libbing in my head. This particular scene came from my Technomage FIC in a proposed summer before 7th year chapter. My intent was to have circumstances drive Harry Stark to the point where he would kill. I showed this around, and many of those who read it told me they liked it, but pleaded that I not take the story in that direction. In reflection, I decided that they were right, and that Harry's final solution will probably not include spreading Tom across several counties in the form of a fine mist. I've got a much better ending for Tom, but I digress. Anyway, rather than have the time I put into this go for naught, I thought I'd offer it up here. This will not be extended or continued. This is it. Pain. Goodbye, my love. July 1st, 1997. Amos Vale Cemetery, Bristol, UK. Raining. Harry thought as he picked himself up from the ground following his abrupt arrival via Portkey. How cliché. Are you all right, Harry? She asked from under her umbrella. Not really, no. Thank you. She nodded, understanding completely, and gestured toward a path leading into the cemetery. He followed the woman on the path that wound its way between the rows of plots. Finally, they arrived. The plot was obvious: fresh sod, the stones still pristine, fresh flowers. Padma Patil, January 4th, 1980 to June 14th, 1997. Daughter, sister, friend. It was a beautiful day. Parvati asked, her dark eyes offering the image of her twin. The service was a mixture of father's traditions from India and mother's from England. She's wearing the jewelry you got her. I fought with father over that. He wanted to send it back to you. I told him that Padma would never take it off. She hesitated, as if just realizing what her words might be doing to him. Would you like me to stay, Harry? There's no need for you to stay, Parvati. I think I need to be alone for a few moments. He took the young woman's hand. Please, get yourself out of this rain. I'll be all right. Thank you for showing me the way. Harry, the girl hesitated again. Why was this so hard? Padma and I shared everything. I know it didn't show at school, but we told each other everything. Padma told me about what the two of you had. Her eyes swam with unshed tears. She was so happy, so proud of you, so in love with you. Did she tell you about the dolls? Harry nodded. I made sure she had it with her. Padma has her Harry doll with her now, and forever. The exotic Gryffindor rose onto her tiptoes to kiss Harry on the cheek. Get the ones who did this, Harry. Hurt them the way they hurt my sister. She turned and walked away, leaving Harry to his grief. After the girl was gone, Harry stood in silence, staring down at the stone, the rain dripping from his hair into his eyes, hiding the tears. He hadn't thought he had any more tears. Harry dropped to his knees, ignoring the wet squelch from the soil. With a trembling hand, he reached out and lightly traced the lettering on her stone. Hey, Padma, the black-haired man murmured. I'm sorry it took so long for me to get here. Dad took me white water rafting in the Canadian Rockies. A last chance for just the two of us, he said. A last chance before I didn't have time for him anymore. I was joking around and just goofing off when they were hurting you. His tears were flowing now, visible despite the rain. We were in the middle of nowhere. We purposely didn't take any method of communications with us, and we never told anyone where we were going. You were gone for 10 days before Franklin found us. His breath caught in his throat. I'm so sorry, Padma. I'm so sorry. I should have. We should go to him. Hermione Granger moved to open the door. An impossibly strong hand stopped her. Leave him alone, Hermione. Franklin Richard set his eyes fixed on his kneeling best friend. He's hurting now. When he's ready, he'll come back on his own. I'll have to be leaving soon. Mom and Dad have forbidden me from having anything to do with Harry or the rest of you. Parvati said quietly. They're trying to protect you. Susan suggested. I know that, Sue. It just makes me so angry. I don't want safe. I want revenge. They've taken Padma. They've taken Lavender. And they've taken Lisa and Justin and Ernie and Colin and Dennis. No one has done anything. The ministry put out a pamphlet telling people how to protect themselves. It boils down to keep your head down until the Horus arrive. We've all seen what Harry can do between his magic, his armor, and the way his mind works. I asked him to. We know. Hannah said. Neville fixed Franklin with a stare. You know Harry best, Franklin. What is he going to do? The blond man's mouth set into a firm line. He couldn't help but know their thoughts. They were frightened for themselves, worried for Harry, and mourning their lost friends. They needed to be encouraged. He's hurting now. In an hour, he's going to be angry. The only son of Reed Richards leaned back in his seat, again turning his attention to his mourning friend. Someone should tell Lord Flight from Death that Dumbledore isn't in charge anymore, and hell is coming. If wishes were fishes, /n. I do not own Harry Potter, nor any of the other characters or situations associated with Harry Potter, nor do I own any of the more interesting inhabitants of Dimsdale or Fairy World. /n2. Warning, like most of my stuff, this is particularly silly and probably should not be read by anyone at any time. Ever. In fact, allowing your children to read this is most likely classified as child abuse in most states. But then if you've ever read any of my stuff, you already know that. If wishes were fishes, a Harry Potter adventure. The last trace of steam evaporated in the autumn air. The train rounded a corner. Harry's hand was still raised in farewell. He'll be all right. murmured Ginny. As Harry looked at her, he lowered his hand absent-mindedly and touched the lightning scar on his forehead. I know he will. The scar had not pained Harry for 19 years. All was well. The tiny pink-haired woman closed the book thoughtfully. Well, that seemed abrupt. Abrupt? The brown-haired boy wearing a pink hat asked, incredulously. That made absolutely no sense. After spending months in a tent with Hermione, he marries Ginny? He named his kid after the dink that was always picking on him? What the heck? I like Ron, Cosmo said, removing his floating crowny thing so as to scratch at his thicket of green hair. He seemed so balanced and smart. Wanda and Timmy just shared a look and shrugged. And Hermione married Ron? The nose to the grindstone bookworm married to the king of the slackers? That's insane. That would be like Trixie Tang marrying. Marrying you, Cosmo suggested helpfully. Well, that's the way the story goes, sport. Wanda sighed, sharing the feeling of let down that the final book had inspired. Want to read Goblet of Fire again? We all really like that one. No, I want to stop Harry from being so stupid. He did the best he could, Timmy. Cosmo noted as he floated by the bed again. I mean, he's no Ron. Timmy. Wanda said in her I'm very concerned about you and about to explain why you're being stupid voice. The magic of the Harry Potter world is very different than ours. Much more limited and don't care. The youngest Turner said. I wish I had a wand that would let me do magic. Okay, done. Cosmos said, waving his wand. A Timmy-sized wand appeared in the boy's hand. 10 inches long balsa, wood with a snail snot core, terminating in a 3-inch sparkling 5-pointed star. Stiff and good for anything the user decided he wanted to do. Timmy, Wanda pleaded for a bit of sanity. Why don't we go help the Crimson Chin again? That's always fun. No, the boy in the pink hat proclaimed. I wish I was being sorted into Gryffindor for Harry's first year. Cosmo cluelessly raised his wand, while Wanda sighed and raised hers as well. Vicky, the world's most evil babysitter, was standing outside Timmy's room, trying to decide which of the horrible tortures she had devised to use on Timmy next. There were 4 distinct options, any of which would have the boy a sobbing wreck in seconds. She shook her head as herself. It was obvious, do all for simultaneously. The evil teen kicked the door open only to find herself looking at a huge, roiling mass of smoke inside the room. The smoke seemed to be forming the words copyright violation. That was odd, she thought as she found herself pulled into the vortex the smoke concealed. /n. Not sure where to go with this one. It makes me giggle when I think of the possibilities. Imagine Snape going into Croaker like convulsions and potions. Imagine Jordan Von Strangle confronting Dumbledore. Imagine the Pixies or anti-fairies aligning themselves with Voldemort. Luna's plan. /n. I don't own Harry Potter and wouldn't particularly care to. I would like a rental agreement with option to buy for Hermione Granger. A short-term contract with Nifedora Tonks wouldn't be turned down. A long-term agreement with Luna Lovegood would probably be a whole lot of fun. Anytime Padma Patil wants to open negotiations, call me and for a weekend with Fleur. Oddly, Lavender and Padma's sister, despite being her twin, Parvati, do nothing for me. Luna's plan. Part 1. A plan is hatched. Luna Lovegood was an upset young lady. You could tell by the pout. Lovegoods in general were renowned for being prodigious pouters. And when Luna combined the Lovegood pout with the lower lip quiver of the Malfoy family that she had inherited from her mother, Luna's pout contravened several strategic arms limitation treaties. However, since the Lovegood family were not signatories to any of those treaties, Luna's father was rather unfairly immune to her pouts. In fact, he often offered suggestions for improving her pouting action. It was unfair. This unfairness, of course, caused Luna to pout even more, adding sniffles learned from Gran Ollivander to the lip quivers. This didn't work either, but it never hurt to practice one's craft. Luna stomped her foot at her father, who cruelly ignored his only daughter and continued to dress for his meeting. The part of Luna's mind not dedicated to the pouting, lip quivering, sniffling, or foot stomping regarded her father's attire with a gimlet eye. He always dressed so conservatively, and really did he have any sense of style? A red cummerbund with green camouflage cargo shorts? She shook her head ruefully. She loved her father dearly, but all of his taste was in his mouth. Everyone knew that purple was the color to wear with camo. And seriously, wearing white socks with his calf-high Doc Martens? Seriously? At least his shirt was nicely pressed. Oh, he was wearing the shotgun shell cufflinks she had gotten him for his birthday. How lovely. Her father had absolutely no sense of style, but he was sweet about it. Wait, she was mad at him, and he deviously distracted her with his lack of fashion sense. The beast. I don't understand why I can't go. She whined, attempting to achieve a new level of pout. You know full well why you can't go, my pretty moon girl, Zeno Lovegood said, checking his fine self in the mirror, while contemplating if his top hat would make a more forceful statement than his trademark pith helmet. No, definitely the helmet. You sealed your own fate last year at the International Conference for Newspapers Without Fact Checkers. You committed the cardinal sin of the business. But Daddy, it wasn't my idea. Nonetheless, you sat down and joined in on the most important discussion of the entire 2-week conference. And then you committed the most unforgivable act this conference has seen. I didn't mean to, Daddy, she said piteously. I know, kumquat, I know. But you did it. She nodded sadly, her eyes downcast, going all in with a pair of twos showing. Zeno shook his head. You bet the quibbler. Luna hung her head even lower. I know, Daddy, I'm sorry. Zeno shook his head. The pot was almost $15.5 million US. I know. 3 other papers have been thrown into the pot, as well as that silly 24-hour cable news channel. Zeno went on. And then you did the unforgivable. It wasn't my fault, Luna whispered. I was distracted. I was lightheaded from the cigar smoke. I never even looked at my whole cards. I've told you repeatedly not to smoke cigars when you gamble, Zeno said, shaking his head dismissively. You turned over both the other twos. Do you remember the problems I had getting the Sun and the News of the World and the Inquirer up the Quibbler standards? And Rupert, well, he still breaks into tears whenever he sees me. He should have known better than to try to draw to that inside straight. Luna pouted. Besides, what was he thinking when he named his news network after a fox? Yes, he should have, and I really don't know, Zeno admitted. Personally, I'm just happy that Bill was outside, trying to scrape up the $500,000 buy-in from the change holders of his car. I have absolutely no idea what I would have done with a small soft company that makes windows of all things. Daddy, I know how a company can be small, but how could it be soft? That hardly matters, Luna, Zeno said, not willing to admit that he had wondered much the same thing since last year's conference. What matters is that you were banned from the conference for all time, plus 5 years. Meanies, Luna said sadly, forgetting to pout. Quite, Zeno agreed. So I'm going to the conference and try to lose those albatrosses back to their original owners. And you can either stay in the room or go to the mall. Going to the mall isn't going to get Harry Potter to notice me. Luna huffed. If he hasn't noticed you, then he is an idiot, my sweet moon girl. He leaned over to kiss his only child's forehead. And no idiot is good enough for my little girl. I probably won't be back until late. You've got money. Enjoy yourself. Yes, Daddy, the blonde said as she watched the door close. Then she stomped her foot again. It was oddly satisfying, but didn't really do anything useful. Just to be sure, she stomped the other foot with similar results. Luna spent perhaps an hour exploring the halls of the hotel, checking each ice machine for clarity and flavor. After puzzling over what appeared to be a muggle version of a wizarding portrait in the lobby that displayed only a fireplace for another hour, she returned to the Lovegood suite. Another 20 minutes was spent exploring the closet in her room. After an exhaustive search, she confirmed that it was indeed empty other than the courtesy iron and ironing board. Just as she suspected, which only made sense, considering that she hadn't actually unpacked yet. Someone left a book in the table beside her bed. She wondered for a moment just who this Gideon was and why he left his book behind. She opened the book to the first page. In the beginning. Well, duh, of course it's the beginning. It's the first page of the story. Sheesh, some writers. Next to the odd clock on the table. No hands, just lighted numbers. She wondered how it did that. She found a small plastic device with odd symbols and numbers on it. Hesitating, she pressed the button marked on. The large plastic and glass box on the wall across from the bed suddenly lit up and started making sounds. Luna bounced on the bed, clapping in celebration for several moments. This must be the TV thing Daddy was always talking about since she had won that cable news network, whatever that was. She scrambled over to her trunk to get some parchment and a quill, so as to record what she had discovered for an article for the Quibbler. Experimenting found that pressing the up arrow labeled volume caused the box to be louder and the down arrow made it quieter. The arrows labeled Chan caused the box to show different things. How? Interesting. Okay, Chan, show me what you have to say. She pushed the arrows for several minutes before settling on a single presentation. The first thing she learned from this presentation is that the proper spelling for the box was TV, and evidently it had a land somewhere. The second thing she learned was that every half hour or so, the presentation changed, and this change was accompanied by some very interesting music and shorter programs that seemed to be dedicated to commerce. It was halfway through the second half hour of watching the land of TV that a very interesting idea dawned on the young woman. The more she thought about it, the more she liked the idea. She abandoned the roll of parchment that held the notes for her article and began another roll with notes for a far more interesting project. It was all she could do to contain her evil cackles. So she didn't and cackled for the rest of the afternoon. Part 2. Luna Junction. The Howards Express pulled slowly into Hogsmeade Station. Harry was returning from the loo where he had changed into his school robes to find Hermione and Ginny crowded around the carriage window in open-mouthed amazement. "What's going on?" Harry asked. "Has there ever been a water tower for the Express before?" Hermione asked. "A water tower?" Ron asked as he entered the compartment. "What's a water tower?" "It's a structure that Muggle steam locomotives use to top off their water tanks," Hermione said, still staring out the window. "But the Express has a magical engine. It doesn't use water." "Well, I've never seen a water tower here," Harry said, peering out the window himself. "For that matter, I've never seen a water tower anywhere." "What's that on the tank?" "It looks like a set of school robes," Ron said, joining Harry at the window. "It does," Harry agreed. "Is that Luna?" "What?" Hermione demanded, elbowing Ron out of the way. "She's swimming in the water tank?" "That girl can be strange sometimes," Ginny said, shaking her head. "I don't know why," Hermione said, sitting back down, "but that seems somehow familiar." Part 3. I Dream of Luna. Harry Potter climbed the stairs to his dorm room, reflecting on what an ass the Gryffindor Quidditch captain was this year. "You're looking rough, mate," Ron Weasley said from where he was dressing after his shower. "Drills with the reserve seeker run long." "Too right," the raven-haired wizard said, pulling his sweat-soaked jersey over his head. "You know what a control-freak perfectionist the captain is this year." "Harry, mate," Ron said quietly. "You're the captain this year." "Yeah," Harry agreed, trying to remove the singlet he wore under the jersey without raising his aching arms over his head. "What's your point?" That was when he saw it. A garish glass bottle lay on his pillow. Harry picked the bottle up with his brow furrowed. "What's this?" he asked the room. "Looks like a bottle," Ron said helpfully. "Thanks, Ron," Harry replied, sarcasm dripping from his voice. "I don't know how I'd get along without you. I've often thought that myself, mate," Ron said with a grin. "What's in it?" Harry held the bottle to the light. "Seems to be empty." "Nothing sadder than an empty bottle," Seamus opined. "I'll take your word for that, Seamus," Harry said, turning the bottle over in his hands. "Wait, what's this?" "What?" Neville asked, giving up on his herbology homework until the conversation died down. He had observed years before that the more of his roommates that joined into a conversation, the less intelligent the conversation seemed to be. "Writing molded into the bottle," Harry explained. He held the bottle up to the light again, this time reading the small writing. "Rub the bottle." "What?" Ron asked. "That's an odd thing to say. Is that another of your Muggle sayings?" "No, Ron. It's what is written on the bottle." "Rub the bottle." "Oh," the youngest male Weasley said. "What are you going to do?" "Well," Harry said, pulling his handkerchief from his back pocket, "I guess I'm going to rub the bottle." "The man who defeated you must not be," said as he set to polishing the aforementioned bottle. Smoke began pouring from the mouth of the container. "Bloody hell," Ron said as a haze filled the room. Haze of a consistency that the dorm hadn't seen since that horrible evening when the house elves made the unwise decision to try a burrito night in the Great Hall. The effect of an even dozen of those aforementioned burritos on the digestive system of Ron Weasley was noted in amazing detail in not one, but 3 medical journals. The result was that any further burrito nights were forbidden for all time, and Dean Thomas, the young man whose bed had been closest to Ron's that horrible night, still burst into tears whenever he saw shredded cheddar cheese. All light was lost to the dorm room for several moments until it cleared and revealed a scantily clad Luna Lovegood standing next to Harry. She wrapped herself around his left arm and rubbed her cheek against Harry's bare chest, cooing, "How can I serve you, master?" "Luna," Harry gasped. "Bloody hell," his 4 dorm mates chorused, their eyes bulging upon seeing her outfit. "Call me Genie, master," the blonde purred. Part 4, Leave It to Luna. 3 days later, Harry returned to the dorm following a rather unpleasant day of school. The new potions mistress, while not as bad as Snape, still hated everyone and everything about the school. The only real difference was with Professor Bastic. The Slytherins also ended up with detentions. Harry trudged up the stairs cursing for the 30th time this year that having to climb 7 stories to the dorm sucked, and that the 7th year should get the first level of dorm rooms, leaving the upper floors for the youngsters with all the energy. He turned the knob on the door and opened it to find Colin and Dennis Creevey in the dorm, both dressed in Muggle jeans and t-shirts. Dennis was also wearing a Muggle baseball cap and Colin a blue cardigan with a large capital M on the lower left side. Each of the brothers held a roll of parchment unrolled in his hand. "Gosh, Wally," Dennis said to his brother Colin. "Dad's gonna be sore, isn't he, Wally?" "Well, sure, Beeve," Colin said, reading from his parchment, which Harry suddenly realized was a script. "Dad always gets sore when we foul up." "You're right, Wally. We fouled up. Boys." Harry looked for the new speaker. "Go get washed up for dinner while I speak with your father." "Okay, Mom," Colin said, guiding Dennis past Harry out of the 7th-year dorm room. "Gosh, Wally," Dennis said as the door closed, though the rest of his next line was lost when the door sealed. Harry then found himself alone in the dorm with Luna. The blonde had her hair piled high on her head. She was wearing some sort of Muggle dress, high heels, and a pearl necklace. "Luna?" Harry asked, the memory of her insisting that he call her Genie and her calling him Master still fresh in his mind. "Luna, what's going on?" "June, Harry, call me June." "How was your day?" she asked, pressing a highball glass into his hand. Harry examined the drink in his hand, wondering what the hell was going on. "All right, I suppose. How about yours?" "The boys have been up to their usual mischief today, so I've got a favor to ask." "What is it, Luna?" The blonde, which came up close and kissed him on the cheek. "I was hoping tonight you might find it in your heart to—" "Yes, Luna?" Harry was concerned about his friend. "I was hoping that just this once, tonight, perhaps you could—" "Yes," he asked. "Maybe tonight you could be really hard on the beaver." Part 5. Married with Luna. After barely escaping from Luna with his virtue intact, Harry had taken to avoiding situations where she might find him. Identification charms preceded him into any room he might want to enter. A liberal use of his invisibility cloak and Harry's recruiting of Hermione to run interference for him had kept him Luna-free for most of a week. Harry had ducked out on the Hogsmeade weekend because, well, frankly, the sleepy little town was boring. Upon entering the common room, Harry felt compelled to stop and hang his jacket in a small closet that he was absolutely positive had never been there before. As soon as this odd task was completed, he turned to find that the common room was emptied of its furnishings, excepting 1 sofa and 2 of the smaller plush chairs. Lying on the sofa in a pair of disturbing mix of skin-tight leopard print spandex and polyester was Luna. Her hair was piled high upon her head, and red, but not a red that occurred in nature, nor even the drunken imaginings of Nymphadora Tonks. "Hello, Harry," Luna said as she popped what appeared to be a chocolate bonbon into her mouth. "Hard day?" No, not really. Don't care. Let's go out, Harry. Take me to dinner, and then make love to me the way that only you can. I mean the full 30 seconds, baby." "Luna," Harry began. "Peggy. Luna Corrective. I'm Peggy today." Harry shrugged. "Okay, fine. Peggy, what the hell is going on?" "I just thought that we might have a little fun before the kids get home, Harry." "Kids? Come on, Harry. Do me like only you can. Then you can tell me about the time you scored 4 times in a single game." "What? Harry?" Ron called as he entered the common room. "Are you sure you don't want to—" He sputtered to a stop when he spotted Luna in her outfit. "Hello, Ronald." The Ravenclaw sighed, getting up off the sofa. "Luna, how do you keep getting into our common room?" Ron asked. "Oh, I just asked the nice lady on your portrait." Luna smiled. "She always lets me in after I talk to her for a while. I'd best be going." "Bye, Harry." "Bye, Luna," Harry said as he watched the younger girl skip out of the common room. When the portrait closed with Luna on the outside, Harry turned to Ron. "Have you got the slightest why she's doing this?" "Don't look at me." Part 6. Luna's Heroes. "I've got something special for you today." There was a low moan from the class. Even Harry joined in. He liked Hagrid, liked him a whole lot, but if the half-giant described a creature as something special, that pretty much ensured that it would be huge, covered with poisonous spikes, and would have a mouth full of teeth designed to eviscerate your average Hogwarts student. Hagrid led the class back behind the Hogwarts stables to an outdoor enclosure. There in the middle of a corral-like structure was a tall man-like creature with huge bat-like wings. Hagrid entered the corral and casually strolled up to the inhuman demon. This class is a Balrog. As you can see, they're taller than most people. Not me, of course. They have the ability to shroud themselves in fire, darkness, and shadow. They frequently appear armed with fiery whips or many thongs, and occasionally use long swords. It's said that they cannot not be killed. Only dragons rival their capacity for friskiness and tomfoolery. The class was absolutely silent while nervously edging away from the corral and the demon it contained. "Oh, come on," Hagrid called. "You can't possibly be afeared of this cute little feller. I mean, look at him." The demon manifested its fire whip and moved to attack the care of magical creatures professor. The half-giant scooped the demon up from the ground and cuddled him like a small child. "Look at him. Ain't he cute? Wanting to play, he does." Placing the writhing demon back onto its feet, Hagrid made his way out of the corral. "All right, who wants to be first to pet the Balrog?" "Harry." Harry backed away from the enclosure, shaking his head as he moved away. "Psst, Harry." Harry stopped his retreat and began to look about trying to figure out who had called his name. Not 10 paces away was a tree stump that Harry was absolutely positive hadn't been there a few moments before. The top of the stump opened on a hidden hinge, and Luna looked out. "Hello, Harry," the blonde Ravenclaw whispered from the faux stump. "Don't be afraid of the Balrog. Compared with a flaming tree tipper, a Balrog is nothing to worry about." That being said, Luna reached up and pulled the top of the faux stump closed. Harry stared open-mouthed for a moment before trading looks with Hagrid. The half-giant shook his head. "I saw nothing. I heard nothing." Part 7. Hot and Spicy Luna. Harry carefully worked the handle on the door to his dormitory, and then cautiously pushed the door open with his foot. No sign of any weirdness. Carefully, he peeked into the room. No one was there. Finally, Harry had remained at Hogwarts for the Christmas break and was the only Gryffindor in residence, and despite that, Luna had been ambushing him the entire week. Harry entered the dorm and cast several locking charms on the door. Safe at last. He grinned at himself. Voldemort had never had him this nervous. Harry moved to his bed. The elves had delivered his clean laundry, and he spent a few moments putting everything away before he was interrupted by a knock at his door. Harry froze, terror gripping his soul for a moment. Then he started laughing at himself again. "Who is it?" "Pizza delivery." Harry knew that this was probably just Luna's latest insanity. Pizza delivery. As if. Still, he was hungry, and he did like pizza. Oh, what the hell? Harry opened the door to find Luna. She was dressed in neon green hot pants and an international orange tank top. On top of her head was a ball cap bearing the legend Pizza. "Hello, Mr. Pizza Delivery," the blonde said with a dazzling smile. The scent of hot pizza assaulted Harry's nose. "How much?" $15, mister." Thinking that $15 seemed to be an odd thing for Luna to ask for, Harry shook his head. "I haven't got any dollars, only galleons." Suddenly, from everywhere around him, a guitar riff sounded. "Bow chicka bow bow." "No money? Well, maybe there's another way you can pay me." "Bow chicka bow bow." Luna handed Harry the box with the pie inside, then took hold of the front of her tank top and pulled it over her head, then reached out and took hold of the front of Harry's shirt. "Come on, mister. You got to pay me for the pizza." Bow chicka bow bow. Some time later, actually several times later, Harry and Luna were cuddled together in post-coital bliss, eating pizza that was something less than hot, but still pretty good, and Harry breached a subject that had been bothering him since the first of the year. Luna, yes, Harry, she asked, cuddling. I was just wondering, if this is what you wanted, why didn't you just deliver some pizza to start with? Oh, I'd done quite a bit of research on Muggle romance since you were Muggle-raised, so I found out all about the land of TV and have been working my way through the various mating rituals. So, everything you've been doing comes from a television program? Oh yes, Harry, TV was just so educational. But none of the normal mating rituals seem to get through to you. It's fortunate that I quit pushing the Chan button and pushed the PPV button instead. That taught me all about the pizza delivery ritual. Bow chicka bow bow. And the soundtrack? Luna shrugged, causing her breast to rub against his chest. It's a catchy tune. I know. Really dumb, but it made me smile. Attack of the Lightning Man. A/N. I do not own Harry Potter, nor any of the other characters or situations associated with Harry Potter. But you knew that. A/N2. This is a collection of shorts that grew out of around Robin on the 3- and 4-part Harmony Yahoo News group. Basically, it was posited that following the fall of Voldemort, Harry was bored and decided for no adequately explained reason to become a costumed superhero, known as Lightning Man. This round robin went on for a few weeks and was a lot of fun. I believe the totality of the entries are posted in the files section of the news group. Anyway, the following shorts are what I offered to the round robin. Cast for the round robin, at least the ones I remember. Lightning Man, Harry Potter. The Librarian, Hermione Granger. Stax the Girl Wonder. Susan Bones, the wonder is how she can stand up with double GS. Viper, Daphne Greengrass. Not Ron the Weasel Boy, Ron Weasley the Ferret. Draco Malfoy. Ermine, Astoria Malfoy Mink, Narcissa Malfoy. Captain Firecrotch, Ginny Weasley. Attack of the Lightning Man. A hero needs a theme song. So here's a little ditty I stole from Meet the Mummy's classic Attack of the Wiener Man, which when I think about it would fit unmodified. He's coming for ya, he's gonna get ya. Attack of the Lightning Man, he's coming for ya. He's gonna get ya. Attack of the Lightning Man, verse 1. Late at night, when the pubs are closing, the criminals take their toll, and the ladies need their favorite defender, a tasty treat of sausage splendor. Big man behind the mask. The Aurors all need him, cause he's on task, the smell of fear and a big right cross. Mild-mannered Harry's got the perfect cover. He's coming for ya. He's gonna get ya. Attack of the Lightning Man. He's coming for ya, he's gonna get ya. Attack of the Lightning Man, verse 2. He fighting crime out in the street. All the honeys want to sample the meat. He can't help but relish the fact. The foot long keeps them coming back. When the ferret's feeling safe and cool. That's when the Lightning Man pummels the fool. Mink and Ermine can't scream when their mouths are full. He's coming for ya. He's gonna get ya. Attack of the Lightning Man. He's coming for ya. He's gonna get ya. Attack of the Lightning Man. Every hero needs an origin. Here's Lightning Man's. Created, Lightning Man. The explosion in front of Gringotts immediately had everyone running, at least those not rendered immune to such things by the Voldemort Wars. Hermione Granger's wand was suddenly in her hand as she and her companions, Susan Bones, Ron and Ginny Weasley, rushed toward the sudden detonation to see if they could render assistance, or in Ron's case to see if there was anything edible. They found an amazing sight upon arriving at the bank. 7 wizards, all wearing the black cloaks and white masks of the departed and largely unlamented Dark Lord Voldemort, stood in a semicircle around a single man who stood between them and the shattered entrance to the wizard's bank. Hermione raised her wand to start hexing the unrepentant Death Eaters when she took in just who was holding them off and what he was wearing. What the hell? She asked the air around her. The wizard facing off against the Death Eaters was none other than Harry Potter. Her friend was dressed in a form-fitting unitard in Gryffindor red with gold trim and cape. Emblazoned across his chest was a pentagram with the letters LM centered across it. His head was bare, except for his glasses and a slim domino mask he wore under them. Surrender, evildoers. Harry's amplified voice echoed throughout the alley. For you face Lightning Man. I am your bane. Defy me at your risk. Oh my, a female voice exclaimed to Hermione's left. Who knew what he had under those robes? This drew the female member of the Golden Trio's attention away from the rather form-fitting portion of the costume Harry was wearing, especially form-fitting just below the waist, to the speaker. Daphne Greengrass was staring at Harry's new costume, with her eyes paying just a little too much attention to the portion of said costume just a bit below the belt line in Hermione's opinion. In the time since the fall of Voldemort and leaving Hogwarts, Daphne had made a name for herself as an heiress and party girl about town. Any further exposition on the Greengrass girl was driven from Hermione's mind when the Death Eaters all attempted to raise their wands and attack the badly disguised Harry. The man in the outrageous costume just laughed when the hexes started flying, then raised his hands. The Death Eaters fell to the ground in agony from the lightning bolts that flew from Harry's outstretched hands. I knew we shouldn't have taken him to that movie. Susan hissed in Hermione's ear. We never could have predicted he would do this after seeing Return of the Jedi, Sue. Hermione whispered back. Have you seen how Daphne is looking at Harry? Daphne? Have you seen the Widow Malfoy and Daphne's sister? Sue asked, pointing at the two blondes standing across the street. Hermione's eyes narrowed when she saw Narcissa Malfoy absently stroking her breasts through the décolletage of her designer robes. She still remembered when the evil woman spent hours interrogating Harry during the war in that horrible private chamber on the Malfoy estate. The only reason she wasn't in Azkaban now was that Harry refused to press charges afterward. Indeed, he seemed to get a mysterious smile whenever he was asked about the event. At long last, a single Auror ran up to the scene. Ah, Auror! Harry's amplified voice boomed out. Just in time, Harry put an arm around the shoulders of the peacekeeper. You know, Auror, they say that confession is good for the soul. The man in red and gold gestured toward the 7 fallen Death Eaters. After you dose them with Veritaserum, I'd listen to these men. Turning on the spot, Harry vanished in a soft crack of apparition. The gathered crowd was silent for several seconds before Ron Weasley's voice broke the quiet. Who was that masked man? Ron, Hermione said patiently. That was Harry. Harry? Don't be silly, Hermione. Ginny Weasley said. He was wearing a mask. Harry doesn't wear a mask. Yeah, Herms, Ron agreed. I don't know where you come up with this stuff. I don't know why I do this to the Weasleys, I really don't. The Weasley Chronicles. All was ready. Arthur Weasley said to himself as he regarded the ultimate fusion of magical and muggle crime fighting technology. It had taken the appearance of the mysterious hero Lightning Man to give Arthur's imagination the push it needed to conceive of this marvel of modern magic and technology. But now he was ready. He sealed the suit of armor that he had so painstakingly modified. Servo motors hummed as he began the startup sequences. Rune clusters glowed as they generated the power needed to push other clusters into form impenetrable shields. With a thought, the 20 wands of his Gatling gauntlet began to spin around the armor's bracer assembly, giving him the casting power of a score of mages. He was ready. Evil doers everywhere would shudder at the mere mention of the name Armor Mage. He took a step, and another, and then pitched forward onto his face as the suit of armor lost all power. As he lay there trapped within his creation because he was unable to override the electrical locks, Arthur reflected that he probably should have used a longer electrical lead. The 6 feet of wire that connected him to his plug didn't really seem to be enough. Bill sighed. Fleur was gone, and likely as not, never coming back. It had been going so well, too. Then one innocent suggestion of a threesome with her hottie Vila mom, and Fleur stormed out in a huff, with streams of French invectives ringing in his ears. How was Bill supposed to know that she would react like that? What if she had only been waiting for him to ask? If he hadn't asked, he never would have known and might have missed out on a good thing. Oh well. Bill picked up the Daily Prophet and examined the photo on the front page. Lightning Man looked like a bit of a poof to the eldest of the Weasley brothers, though the face was familiar. But no, Bill didn't know anyone who wore a mask. Bill stood and pulled on his trademark dragon skin jacket, making sure that his ponytail wasn't caught in the collar. Look out, ladies. Captain Cool is on the prowl. Charlie Weasley wiped at the mirror to clear away the fog on its surface so that he might shave. The news from home was, well, weird, but at least it was goofy weird and not deadly dangerous weird. He lathered his face and began the first cut with the razor, while reflecting on the news of the costumed idiot dedicated to fighting crime, and the other costumed idiots as being there seemed to spawn. Weirdo adrenaline junkies who lacked the stones to take on a really dangerous job like his. Charlie was just glad that his family was well and truly out of it for this bit of silliness. After everything that happened with that Dark Lord Dink and the family's association with Harry Potter, it had been close for a while. And then when Harry and Ginny had dated for a month or so, Charlie just thanked Merlin that all of that was over. He inspected his face in the mirror. Nice. With practiced ease, Charlie splashed on a healthy dose of the Muggle cologne his father had given him at Christmas the previous year, dimly wondering just what high karate might mean. Whatever, his girl liked it. There was something about the scent that drove her wild. Charlie pulled on his leather singlet, admiring how the garment exposed his muscular arms. Leather trousers and boot completed his outfit, and he set out to find his love. He set out across the Dragon Preserve in search of Kiska. He was 2/3 of the way to the breeding pens before he spotted her, where she was lounging with a drink as she watched a trio of yearling drakes playing aerial tag against the sapphire blue Romanian sky. Carefully, he approached her in silence. This was a game they started when the pair had met 3 years before. The first to spot the other always attempted to sneak up on the other. Charlie quickly covered her eyes with his hands, only to have her pressed back against him. Evidently, he hadn't been as stealthy as he had hoped. Kiska turned to face Charlie and took in his scent. The cologne had her nipping at his arm as her excitement grew. The pair gazed deeply into each other's eyes, and no words were necessary. For only a second, Charlie's thoughts drifted back to the idiot who dressed up in his underwear to fight crime in Diagon Alley. Idiot, he thought. If that fool wanted excitement, he should try to live a day in Charlie Weasley's shoes. Charlie Weasley, the man famous worldwide, undid his belt and allowed his trousers to pull at his boots. No matter where you went in the world, you would find dragon keepers congregating. Glasses would be raised to Charlie Weasley, the only man to ever stump break a dragon. Kiska looked back at him over her shoulder with those soft brown eyes and lifted her tail. So, Percy Weasley thought as he read through the newspaper. It finally happened. There was finally a second superhero fighting for what was right, for what was good, and for what was British in magical Britain. For so long, Percy had been alone in his fight. For so long, he had feared that it would always be just him. Now that there was another, perhaps this help would allow Percy the time it would take to regain the love of Penny. She had never understood that Percy was driven to live this double life. She had always been jealous of Percy's mistress, the woman called Justice. But Percy was honest enough with himself to know that there was more than enough wrong with the world to occupy even two such as himself 24 hours a day. Still, it was good to know one wasn't quite so alone in the fight. His attention once again returned to the parchment work on his desk, his 20-minute lunch hour over for another day. Wait, what's this? Someone was attempting to roll back the progress that Percy had made in pursuit of uniform cauldron bottoms over the last 5 years. This Lightning Man character could keep his showy battle against crime in the streets. This was a job for magical Britain's first superhero. This was a job for Captain Conformity. Poor Harry. Right you are, George. The poor boy needs to learn something about subtlety. Fred agreed. Imagine that he actually thought that that silly costume would fool us. George said, shaking his head in amusement, as if we couldn't see through his disguise. Not after Hermione pointed out that Lightning Man was Harry 5 or 6 times. George agreed. Or that time we spotted him changing behind our shop and took pictures. Fred laughed. And when we found the Lightning Man costume in Harry's laundry. George giggled. And there were property of Harry Potter tags sewn into each piece of the outfit. Fred summarized. When we considered all those subtle hints, it was pretty obvious that Harry and Lightning Man are more than just good friends, George said, making air quotes with his fingers. We'll keep his secret. Fred swore. Right? Harry's a big boy, and his sex life is his own business. Fred smacked George on the back of his head. Not that secret, you Ollie. George rubbed the back of his head while staring suspiciously at his traitorous brother. Right, the other thing? The prettier of the two, identical twins, suddenly had a revelation. We must join Harry in his fight. What? The smarter twin asked, wondering if he would be looking back on this moment as the moment the plan suddenly started to go seriously wrong. We, George said, starting to monologue shamelessly, must join Harry in his fight for truth, justice, and the magical British way. You want us to ignore things and hope they go away? Fred asked, confused. No, you fool, George said, delivering a dope slap of his own. We must become superheroes. It was a normal, quiet day in the alley since the fall of Voldemort and his Death Eaters, and the rise of the hero known as Lightning Man. Peace, serenity, and most important, profitable commerce had returned to Diagon Alley with a vengeance. Of course, wherever there are people with money to spend, there are those who would separate the haves from their money, by force if necessary. Dennis Tiebold had been a minor Death Eater. Very minor. In fact, he had been one of 47 accountants in the Dark Lord's employ, charged with keeping the dark books for the Dark Organization. Tiebold had been the second chair accountant on the Dark payroll, ensuring that the Dark paychecks were issued on time, with the Dark withholdings withheld. Not even a Dark Organization went against the inland revenue. Voldemort might have been evil, but he wasn't stupid. Voldemort hadn't even bothered to mark his accountants, so the guys in the pool would take turns drawing the accounting dark mark on each other's arms using a muggle felt tip pen that smelled pretty bad at first, but much better later. Once the Dark Lord fell to that Pratt Potter, all the guys in the accounting squad waited patiently for the Aurors to show up and take them away. After 3 months of waiting, the 47 Dark accountants all looked at each other and shrugged while muttering about people having no understanding of how important it was to balance the books. They rose as one and presented themselves to the local Auror station for arrest, only to be told that they probably ought to go home, as they weren't wanted for any crimes, and frankly they weren't interesting enough for anyone to bother looking into. That, and the fact that Dennis insisted on putting Dark accountant responsible for the payroll of a 2,000-person Dark organization on his curriculum vitae caused Dennis to be fairly unemployable. This is why Dennis was on the first day of his newest career choice, that being a cut purse in Diagon Alley. In fact, Dennis had just made his first professional theft, having cut the coin purse from the belt of the well-dressed wizard when his victim hollered, "Stop, thief!" And Dennis Thibault's day suddenly took a turn for the worse. "Halt, citizen," the figure that suddenly appeared in front of the fleeing cut purse said in a booming baritone. Dennis stopped to look at the man who had stopped him. He appeared to be covered head to toe in muggle aluminum foil, leaving only his face bare to the world. "Yes, evildoer," the man boomed in his oddly amplified voice. "You face Professor Chaos. I and my sidekick Binky the Wonder Clone have sworn to keep Diagon Alley safe, free, happy, and several other unquantifiable conditions." Wait a minute. To Dennis' amazement, another man dressed identically to the man who identified himself as Professor Chaos. "What do you mean calling me the clone? I'm not the clone. You're the clone." "Nonsense, Binky," the original loon in foil boomed. "I am Professor Chaos, so you are Binky, the clone," he said slowly as if to a child. "You're the clone," Binky said, pushing Chaos again. "Bullshit," Chaos countered intelligently. "You're the clone." "You take that back. You're the clone." For the next 20 minutes, the two foil Avengers rolled around on the cobbles of Diagon Alley, doing each other damage. Dennis found the man he had stolen the purse from and returned it. He then left the alley and never returned. It had gotten entirely too weird. This was the first, last, and only time Fred and George attempted to become superheroes. After that day, they contented themselves with being the weaponeers of supervillains, who always passed the shutdown codes for their weapons to Harry Potter. Harry never understood why they were giving him the pieces of paper, and out of concern and a general distrust of anything the twins might hand him, always threw the shutdown codes away. Heroines need origins too. The secret origin of the librarian and Stax the Wonder Girl. "Hermione?" Susan asked. "Oh, that man," the bushy-haired witch ranted. Susan entered her friend's room to find her surrounded by newspapers whose headlines told the story of Harry's alter egos laying waste to crime and criminals everywhere. What has Harry done this time? He's still running around in that stupid costume, and now he's sucked Hedwig into it. Look at this. Susan took the offered photograph from her friend. He's got Hedwig wearing a mask? How do you get an owl to wear a mask? That's not Hedwig. That's Thunder Owl if you listen to Ron. And still no one believes me when I point out that Harry is Lightning Man. Well, the Weasleys don't believe you. I think pretty much everyone with the slightest bit of common sense has made the connection. His disguise isn't very good, the pretty redhead pointed out. And worse yet, Now Daphne and Fleur have gotten into the act. There is suddenly a pair of costumed jewel thieves who is constantly being thwarted by Lightning Man. Those sluts are just trying to get their claws into Harry. Those skanky bitches, Susan exclaimed as she examined the newspaper photo of the leather-clad criminal. We can't let them do that to our Harry. Our Harry. Oh, Susan blushed. Was that out loud? Hermione raised an eyebrow. Okay, so I think he's hot. But you're his best friend. That means you get first shot. The redhead smiled. And since you're my best friend, I was sure you'd be willing to share. It was Hermione's turn to blush. I suppose I could see my way clear for that. But what do you propose we do? Dress up like loons in outlandish costumes and commit crimes to that Harry will come to fight us. And we can capture him in inescapable death traps and have our way with him. Susan gave Hermione an odd look, noticing how her rate of breathing had increased. Her eyes dilated, and a perky set of nipples seemed to be attempting to push their way out of Hermione's blouse. That was hot as hell. You seem to have put quite a bit of thought into this idea already. Well, I review hypothetical situations all the time, you see. Yeah, right? Susan grabbed a sheet of paper and a pen off Hermione's desk and sat down on one of the room's comfy chairs. I was thinking about us going out as heroes. Actually, she began to sketch out some ideas. We could use that subterranean research library the 7th year Ravenclaws built for you as repayment for all that Newt review you gave them back in our 4th year as our headquarters. Headquarters? The librarian will need a safe refuge from where to plan her defense of ancient artifacts. Susan said matter-of-factly. The librarian? Hermione asked. That's a dumb name for a villain. Not a villain, Susan said, shaking her head. A heroine. The heroine. Heroes may dally with the bad girls, but they stay with the good girls as long as the good girls know when to be naughty. The redhead passed over a sheet of the parchment she had been doodling on. Here's what I was thinking of for your costume. Hermione brought her hand to her mouth. Oh my. She looked up to Susan's eyes. And this other figure? Oh, that's your loyal sidekick, Stax. Stax? Yep. Keeping with the librarian motif. Susan explained patiently. This drawing has me wearing glasses. I don't wear glasses. Susan shrugged. It's part of your disguise. What do the Weasleys and the other dullards all say to you when you try and tell them that Harry is Lightning Man? Lightning Man wears a mask, and Harry never wears a mask, so he can't be Lightning Man, right? Well, Hermione Granger never wears glasses, so she can't be the librarian. Hermione concluded. That would probably work, and that makes me more than a little sad. I haven't figured out what kind of mask I should wear. A simple domino mask like Harry's, or maybe a full-faced helmet. You won't need a mask, Hermione said absently. What do you mean? Face it, Sue, Hermione grinned. If you're wearing something like the outfit you've drawn here, with those double GS of yours out on display, no one will ever be looking at your face. Hell, any male villains who show up probably won't be able to run away. This was my original offering to the round robin. In a quiet suburb of a major metropolitan city was a house. It wasn't just any house. It was the home of not one, but 2 British dentists. This information alone was enough to cause most right-thinking people to hesitate before coming onto their block. But as is often the case, the true danger of this upscale home was hidden. For one of the residents of the house was a witch. And not just for 3 to 5 days each month either. She was a full-fledged, wand-waving, pointy hat-wearing, though in all truth, only on formal occasions, having a cat familiar broom-riding only when no other option was available, given her fear of heights, certified fully qualified by the Ministry of Magic witch. The young woman in question was in her bedroom in her parents' home, working. The only sound in the room was the scratch of quill on parchment and the contented purr of her familiar Crookshanks. She was composing a report on a rather esoteric branch of magical thought. Her mind was a raging torrent, flooded with rivulets of thought cascading into a waterfall of creative alternatives. When she suddenly stopped, her quill poised a fraction of an inch above the parchment. Harry's senses tingling, she said to the room. Crookshanks looked up from his morning grooming to regard his principal provider of tasty things and tummy rubs in a manner which said, yes, so? He's being stupid. Her chestnut brown eyes narrowed. He's being stupid with that skank Daphne. To the research library. Carefully placing her quill into its storage holder, she stood from her desk, moving quickly to the bust of Madeline L'Engle, the librarian and writer-in-residence of New York City's The Cathedral of St. John the Divine. With a deft move, she tilted back the head of her favorite author and pressed the hidden button that was revealed. Immediately, two of the room's massive bookshelves silently moved out from the wall and then split apart, revealing a hidden chamber containing a fireman's pole labeled with a sign inscribed Hermione. The young witch crossed the room to the pole and then paused. "Duty calls, Crookshanks. Hold down the fort." With that, she leapt to the pole and slid downward, disappearing from sight. Crookshanks watched with supreme disinterest as the bookshelves returned to their original configuration and yawned. He idly wondered if this meant that lunch would be late. Horrible ideas like that required much reflection and thought. He resolved to sleep on it. Hermione slid down the pole, anticipating the last 900 feet of the ride, where the pole was no longer smooth and carefully lubricated. Rather, it was ridged and very carefully lubricated, designed in such a way as to ensure that she paid an inordinate amount of attention to holding on tight. Arriving at the bottom of the pole, that she had nicknamed Harry for no particular reason, out of breath, she held herself upright by clinging to that magnificent vertical structural member, panting slightly, her legs trembling as they became used to bearing her. Wait once more. She released the pole, pausing only to lightly kiss it. The charms at the halfway point of her slide down had transfigured her street clothing into the uniform of the librarian. A starched white blouse, neatly tucked into dark black pleated skirt, black stocking, and sensible shoes. Her hair was neatly styled into a bun, a black velvet cameo choker at her throat, and to protect her secret identity from wizards anyway, a pair of gold-rimmed glasses framed her eyes. "Good ride, librarian," a happy voice spoke, breaking the silence of her inner sanctum, the research library. Indeed, it was Stax. The librarian said, having caught her breath, and smiled at her psychic Stax, who in real life was Hermione's youthful ward, Susan Bones. None of that was actually true. Susan wasn't really Hermione's ward. Following the death of Susan's Aunt Amelia, the young redhead had bounced around looking for a place to call home. It was an invitation to visit the Granger home over one summer that had cemented their relationship. As Susan told the story, she simply never left. As far as youthful goes, Susan was all of 7 days younger than Hermione. And Susan was not Hermione's sidekick. Their relationship was best explained as co-equal partners joined together to prevent any of those horny money-grubbing skanks from getting their claws into Harry. After seeing what the women of the magical world were doing to try and capture Harry's heart in the post-Voldemort world by joining in on his somewhat insane quest to be a superhero, Hermione and Susan had established their own secret identities in an attempt to show him how silly he was being. Susan's codename Stax, well, that one was true because the buxom redhead was, well, stacked. "I know I like it," Stax said, referring to the pole ride. "I do it 6 or 7 times a day." "Yes, well," a flustered librarian said, not willing to admit to her 7 times a day average. "What are the Harry detectors telling us?" 21.59 centimeters erect. "No, I mean, really?" "Oh yeah," the redhead said wistfully. "Okay, saving that bit of vital information for later. I mean, where is he?" Stax manipulated a few controls on the library computer. "He's in the Viper's hideout number 6, the Passion Pit." "Damn," the librarian swore. "We got to rescue him from himself." To the bookmobile. One of the running gags of the round robin was that Draco is a furry. If you don't know what that is, consider yourself lucky, and has dragged his wife and mother into this as unwilling sidekicks. Despite of this, he develops a most unhealthy attraction to the librarian. This was my explanation for their first meeting. How the librarian met the ferret. "Take that," the information scientist of justice said as she landed a roundhouse kick to the face of the idiot in the ferret costume. "And that," she continued as she landed an uppercut to his groin. "And one of these," she called as she dropped a flying elbow on the chest of the now prone evildoer. Said prone evildoer gazed upwards at the senior member of the Dewey Decimal Duo in a dazed manner, taking in the wild hair that had somehow escaped from its restraining bun, the strong legs extending from the short pleated skirt, the white knickers darkened with just a hint of moisture the sensible shoes currently pummeling his rib cage. He saw all the signs of another furry. It was so obvious. This was just her way of flirting. His heart was captured. His wife was nothing compared to this goddess of pain, the empress of pummeling, this hot mama of testicle crushing. To hell with that cold fish of a wife he ended up saddled with. This was his new dream girl, whoever she was. Of course, all that might also just be his brand new concussion talking. It was obvious what had happened. The ferret had been researching his next attack, pretending to read a book, all the while making notes of the defenses of the building, when out of nowhere the researcher of righteousness had attacked, bringing his nefarious plotting to an end. Obviously, the maid of meticulous note taking had sussed out his evil preparation and taken steps to prevent him from succeeding. The librarian was furious. She had spotted the idiot in the white costume and suspected that he was one of the morons that Harry was always playing with, and as a consequence, not worthy of her attention. Then the idiot committed the most heinous of crimes, one that made her blood boil. Such an evil must be punished. So punished he was, in a beating he was unlikely to ever forget. It would be a very long time before he dog-eared another page in a book. This one took on a darker tone than the rest of the round robin and doesn't really fit. But I still thought it was a good rip-off of someone else's professional work. Lightning Man cautiously eased into the hallway outside the chamber where the meeting was to take place. He was a bit ashamed of himself for allowing the various women who had taken to dressing up in odd costumes lately to distract him from the reason he had put this silly costume on in the first place. He had set out to help people, not get laid. Though, getting laid by a small crowd of the hottest witches on the planet wasn't all that bad. Harry had heard rumors of a meeting of those Death Eaters who were still free. No more than 20 of them. His lips twitched in a barely restrained smirk. They would likely shit themselves as soon as they saw him. Outside the door, the caped carnologist gathered his magic and apparat to the center of the next room with a thunderous clap. And the hero appeared in the middle of the carnage rarely seen outside of a bargain slaughterhouse. There were portions of the bodies of Death Eaters all around him, blood puddled on the floor, human viscera spread out over the entire room, and the room was filled with the smell of death. Seemingly, the only part of the room not covered in gore was a raised platform against the far wall. The platform was shrouded somehow. Harry couldn't quite make out what was on it. "It's about time you showed up." A deep, gravelly voice came from behind the hero. Lightning Man whirled about and found himself staring at a man clad head to toe in black leather body armor, with only his blue eyes and mouth to jaw line exposed to the air. "Who are you?" the living legend asked. "Did you do this?" "I am pain. I am vengeance. I am the night," the unknown man answered. "And yes, I did this." "Why?" "Because you won't. You capture them and turn them over to the ministry, which allows them to buy their freedom again, and they kill again." Lightning Man's mouth set into a firm line. "I'll be arresting you then." "No, Potter, you won't." In spite of himself, Lightning Man blanched. His disguise had never been very good, but so far no wizard had penetrated it. "Who?" he asked weakly. "Don't even try with me, Harry. I know all your weaknesses. You will never turn me over to the ministry, because if you do, someone will die." "Is that a threat?" "Not at all," the man in black answered. "It is a statement of fact. I've long known that sooner or later I would have to deal with you. I knew I couldn't match you for power, so I had to prepare a method of neutralizing you. That made your people-saving thing my best target. Somewhere in the world, there is an innocent with a bomb secreted upon his or her body. That bomb is triggered by your magical signature. You cast a single spell, any spell at all on me, and the innocent dies messily. Even touching me will detonate the bomb." Lightning Man's passive legitimacy told him that the stranger in body armor was telling the truth. "Why are you doing this?" "As I said, because you won't. Because you believe yourself too good to do what must be done. The surviving Death Eaters were not afraid of you. Rather, they respected your power. They are terrified of me. Respect wouldn't have stopped them from following the next self-appointed Dark Lord that comes along. Fear, however, will. After all, Death Eaters and their ilk are a superstitious and cowardly lot. I stand between the innocents and those who would do them harm." He gestured toward the shrouded raised platform. 4 Muggle girls are in that box. The youngest is 13, the oldest 17. They were intended to be party favors for these bastards. Not any longer. But Lightning Man said before he was interrupted by the soft chime of a warning ward. "Excuse me a moment, Harry," the man in armor asked before fading into the shadows. There was a crack of apparition as 5 black robe-clad wizards suddenly appeared. The newcomers all seemed to be shocked by the carnage that surrounded them. Harry stepped back into the shadows that the wizard in black had used. He honestly didn't know which to help, and he didn't know if his casting anything wouldn't trigger the bomb that the gravel-voiced man had spoke of. "You have one chance." The gravelly voice rang out from everywhere in the chamber. "If you want to live, drop your wands and surrender." As one, the 5 Death Eaters raised their wands, searching for a target. "Thank you. Thank you so very much," the voice said as the wizard in body armor appeared in the midst of the Death Eaters. A glittering silver sword appeared in the armored wizard's right hand and slashed out, slicing open the belly of the closest Death Eater. Harry's eyes widened as he recognized the sword of Gryffindor in the other man's hand. A small something impacted on the head of one of the outermost Death Eaters, and the man's head seemed to explode. While Harry attempted to digest the impossibility of this situation, the wizard with the sword of Gryffindor did a dance of death within the circle of the surviving Death Eaters. 2 more fell to his sword, while the third's neck suddenly snapped with no evident cause. Harry blinked. What kind of magic was he using? And how did the man get the sword of Gryffindor? The man in black cleaned the sword on the robes of one of the fallen Death Eaters. "You knew what they were, and you didn't move." "Oh, I know you're justifying it to yourself because of the bomb, but even if I didn't have one, you wouldn't have done anything until they did something first. If things are going to be better, if children are going to be allowed to grow up with their parents, then someone has to be proactive instead of reactive." The man released the sword of Gryffindor, and it vanished, presumably returning to wherever it had come from in the first place. "That someone isn't going to be you, so it's going to be me, Harry." The man reached into a pouch on his belt and withdrew a device that Harry couldn't identify. "Don't follow me, Harry. I don't want to have to hurt you, but I will. Go back to your games with the girls. Leave the evil bastards of the world to me." The man paused for a moment and then began again. "If your games hurt Hermione or Susan, I'll kill you. Just remember that." He pointed his device toward the skylight above their heads. A line shot out of it and flew upward. "Kung Fu Toad," he called time ago. The small gray something Harry had seen before landed on the armored wizard's shoulder, and the pair flew upward, through the skylight, and vanished from view. Harry was struck dumb, trying to figure out what was the most disturbing, the sociopathic wizard in body armor killing Death Eaters like a muggle, or a man killing Toad wearing a mask. A Curse Before Christmas. A/N. I don't own Harry Potter, and wouldn't particularly care to. I would like a rental agreement with option to buy for Hermione Granger. A short-term contract with Nymphadora Tonks wouldn't be turned down. A long-term agreement with Luna Lovegood would probably be a whole lot of fun. Anytime Padma Patil wants to open negotiations, call me and O for a weekend with Fleur. Oddly, Lavender and Padma's sister, despite being her twin, Parvati, do nothing for me. Okay, this is not my fault. On the 3- and 4-part Harmony Yahoo group, a suggestion was offered for a holiday drabble by the inimitable Hellish Lord. To wit, a random Death Eater accidentally kills Santa Claus, and now Voldemort has to play the part of delivering presents. Not necessarily smutty, but good for a laugh if Voldemort, using all the resources at his disposal, decides that what a 16-year-old wizard really needs is a hot older woman. Due to the magic of Christmas, Voldemort and co. can't really harm anyone. Bonus points for the Death Eaters in elf suits. Further points for Voldemort shouting, "You killed Santa Claus?" "What do you mean, you killed Santa Claus? How could I pass that up?" The Curse Before Christmas. The Dark Lord Voldemort felt the beginnings of a migraine starting to form behind his eyes as he asked himself just why he had gotten into the Dark Lord business in the first place. He had been a prefect and then head boy. Even that cushy place-keeping job for Borgans hadn't been bad. But no, he had to try for absolute power. "Father Christmas?" Voldemort asked again, pinching his face where his nose would have been if he still had one. "You're telling me that you have killed Father Christmas? On Christmas Eve?" "Yes, my lord. As our gift to you, We captured the muggle-loving fool before he had started his rounds. He refused to swear allegiance to you, so I punished him." Bellatrix Lestrange explained happily. "His screams were exquisite. And you have no idea what you've done?" The Dark Lord asked. "You truly have no idea what you've done?" There was a pop and a strangely dressed being appeared at Voldemort's left elbow. Of course she doesn't. Few in the magical world know their history in any detail at all. A feeling of dread filled what remained of Voldemort's soul, while his assembled Death Eaters whipped out their wands almost as one and brandished them at the intruder. The Dark Lord himself simply raised a hand to calm them. "And you are the keeper of the curse?" "I am." I was beginning to wonder if anyone would ever be stupid enough to violate the terms of the Curse of Christmas. The small man said, smiling widely. "I would like to make the point that I knew nothing of the plot against Father Christmas, and I most specifically did not participate in the attack on him." History's most feared dark wizard said hopefully. "All very true." The keeper of the Curse of Christmas responded. "However, it was done in your name by your minions. As far as the magic of the curse is concerned, it is as if you tortured your predecessor to death yourself." "Of course," Voldemort sighed. "I don't know why I expected anything else." The Dark Lord wiped out his wand. "Avada Kedavra," he spat, pointing his wand at the keeper of the Christmas curse. His hand burst into flame. Voldemort experienced several minutes of agony until he managed to douse the flames and Bellatrix cast a numbing charm on his damaged wand hand. The keeper simply raised an eyebrow. "Surely you didn't think that would work, did you?" "No," Voldemort admitted through clenched teeth, "but I had to try. With the death of your predecessor, his minions have also passed on to their rewards. Fortunately for you, you already have an ample number of minions and followers, so you won't be recruiting from scratch." The keeper of the curse made an idle gesture, and the assembled Death Eaters found that their dark robes were suddenly transformed into green woolen outfits trimmed in white satin. "Your minions will find the accommodations a bit cramped. The magic of the Curse of Christmas will of course modify them to fit in, as it were, but that will take decades. For now, they will simply have to learn to be giant elves." "Master," Lucius Malfoy pleaded, his voice now high-pitched as if he had been huffing helium. "You are the greatest wizard to ever live. Surely you can protect us from this." The keeper of the curse examined the platinum-blonde giant elf closely, and then referred to a list on the clipboard he carried. "Ah yes, Lucius Malfoy. Definitely naughty. Thank you for reminding me." The small man gestured once again. Suddenly Narcissa and Draco were standing on either side of Lucius, clad in identical garb and looking about in amazement. Throughout Voldemort's throne room, all of the families of the various Death Eaters appeared. "All of your families join you in your servitude to the Curse of Christmas, because after all," the keeper smiled a most evil smile, "Christmas is all about family. The Dark Lord will punish you for this." Draco Malfoy squeaked the pitch of his voice, such that it caused dogs to howl in pain for miles around. "Of course he will, Draco Malfoy." The small man sighed. "Of course there is a special punishment for the one who actually slew Father Christmas." Bellatrix, still clad in her traditional black robes, backed away from this man who could so casually injure her master. "Your lord will take on the brunt of the punishment required of the Curse of Christmas. But you are not going to avoid your own punishment, Bellatrix Black Lestrange." The man gestured, and the Dark Witch's robes transformed into a heavy dark green woolen dress, complete with red petticoats. "As your master is now Father Christmas, you are now Mother Christmas, with a special duty to the children of the world, be they magical or not." "And oh," she shrieked before she turned to her master. Voldemort's transformation was complete. His robes of red and white, a white beard sprouted from his face, a nose grew, and his eyes faded from red to a sparkling blue. "No, no, no," Voldemort cried in disbelief that such a fate could befall him. "No, no, ho, 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 ho," he began laughing as his belly shook like a bowl full of jelly. "Ho, ho, ho, we are Santa's elves." The assembled giant elves/Death Eaters sang to the music that was suddenly everywhere. "We are Santa's elves, filling Santa's shelves with a toy for each girl and boy. Oh, we are Santa's elves." Lucius and Draco Malfoy were wide-eyed in panic as they drew breath for the next verse. "We work hard all day, But our work is play dolls we try out. See if they cry out? We are Santa's elves. Standing between their respective fathers, Greg Goyle and Vincent Crabbe, were actually happy. A job they could understand, songs to sing, and spiffy hats to wear. Their lives were looking up. We've a special job each year. We don't like to brag. Christmas Eve, we always fill Santa's bag. The full extent of the Christmas curse was finally dawning on Voldemort, and the horror of what was to become of his life filled his imagination. Santa knows who's good, do the things you should, and we bet you he won't forget you. For Bellatrix's part, she realized that while she would never again be in a position to cleanse the world of blood traitors and muggle trash, at least she would be spending that life with her beloved master. We are Santa's elves. We are Santa's elves, ho ho. Sometimes, the keeper of the Christmas curse noted, karma is a bitch. It seemed to the world that the Dark Lord Voldemort and all of his Death Eaters, and all the members of several prominent pure blood families, simply vanished from the face of the earth. This is not to say that there was no longer any evil in the world, for indeed there still was, but despite that there seemed to be peace. For the young man named Harry Potter, this peace was somewhat disconcerting. He had simply woken Christmas morning to find that his scar had faded to almost nothing. He first noticed when shaving before going downstairs to meet with the Grangers for Christmas morning. Hermione had insisted that it was her turn to host her friend's time away from Hogwarts over the Christmas halls, and that was how Harry found himself experiencing quiet family life for the first time. Following Granger tradition, the family had a quiet breakfast of pancakes and jam before retiring to the sitting room to open gifts. Hermione was pleased with the calligraphy pens Harry had gotten her, and the elder Grangers were effuse with their thanks for the charmed surgical smocks he had gotten them, guaranteed to remain unstained and dry for 30 years. What was odd was the unexplained gifts that each person found under the tree. Hermione received a charm bracelet featuring 12 charms that each played one of her favorite memories when she held the individual charm between her thumb and forefinger. Martin Granger received an antique electric train set, exactly the gift he had lusted after but hadn't received when he was 10 years old. Margot Granger received a first-edition copy of Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn. She looked about the room, trying to decide which of the three people looking at her had figured out what her favorite book was and had purchased this treasure for her. Harry received a carefully wrapped Canute coin and a note that read, "As if I'd give you anything you really wanted, Potter." Hermione paled at that. "Harry, could these things be from Voldemort?" "I don't see how," the young man said. "I feel it whenever he's near, and I've felt nothing at all since yesterday. And my scar, if Voldemort was around, it wouldn't have shriveled to nothing like this." There was a flash of light, and yet another gift suddenly appeared under the tree. The three Grangers and Harry exchanged looks. "That's not right," Martin Granger observed. Hermione and Margot peered at the package together. "It's for you, Harry," Margot volunteered. "This can't be safe, Harry," Hermione noted. "There's no magic in that package, Hermione," Harry said, waving his wand about the box. "Better to open it than sit here worrying about it." The boy who lived gingerly took the colorfully wrapped package and carefully opened it. Inside was a glass sphere the size of a cricket ball. As soon as he lifted the sphere, he was immersed in what he somehow knew was his mother's love. Gasping, Harry pulled the glass ball to his chest to hold it tight, never noticing the tears that were running down his face. "Harry?" Hermione asked, more than a little alarmed at her friend's reaction. "Harry, there's a note." Harry nodded and wiped at his eyes as he set the sphere down and reached for the note. "Damn you, Potter." Father Christmas. A/N. We Are Santa's Elves was composed by Johnny Marks in 1964. Exit. Stage left. A/N. I don't own Harry Potter and wouldn't particularly care to. I would like a rental agreement with option to buy for Hermione Granger. A short-term contract with Nymphadora Tonks wouldn't be turned down. A long-term agreement with Luna Lovegood would probably be a whole lot of fun. Anytime Padma Patil wants to open negotiations, call me and O for a weekend with Fleur. Oddly, Lavender and Padma's sister, despite being her twin, Parvati, do nothing for me. Exit stage left, and this story was inspired by another story, specifically http://www.fanfic.org/story 26452/Manchester plus like plus help plus he plus will. HTM. It's a lot of fun, a deconstruction of the Harry gets a harem and none of the guys complain about it meme. But it inspired this one from me. The ending of like hell he will crack me up, but then I couldn't get this idea out of my head. It's a similar setup, a prophecy offered that says Voldemort is toast and Harry will be getting all the women. But in this one, Harry hears the prediction and realizes what it will mean. The Dark Lord will fall in battle this night, and the Chosen One will take the Dark One's power as his own. Silence filled the great hall, as every eye suddenly focused on the third-year Hufflepuff, who was inexplicably glowing, his eyes wide with only the whites showing. The boy noisily drew a breath and continued. With that power, the Chosen One will take his brides, and they will be as one. Another prophecy? Harry Potter flinched, almost recoiling from the mere idea. Brides? As in plural? That could not possibly be good. The witches of the world will bond with the Chosen One and with no other, for they will know his true power and will revel in it. What? Harry looked about the great hall, taking in the expressions of the assembled students and staff. They were buying this? Some magical kid gets all glowy and starts spouting nonsense, and everyone believes him? It was only then Harry realized what was being said. The witches of the world? What the hell did that mean? Surely not. Not all of them? Fake. A visibly inebriated Sybil Trelawney protested from her place at the staff table, sloshing a goblet of some amber liquid over herself and those sitting on either side of her. That's not how you do a prophecy. You just don't start spouting nonsense with a definite outcome. You have to shroud it in mumbo-jumbo and such. It keeps the punters coming back. The tipsy, which took another deep drink from her goblet. The glowing thing is a nice touch, though. Somehow the drunken woman's protest didn't make Harry feel any better as the third year continued. The witches of the world will know the touch of the Chosen One and will find joy such as they have never known. It was at this point Harry noticed that all of the girls at the Gryffindor table were inspecting him in a speculative manner. Even perhaps especially Hermione. Even Hermione. The Dark Lord will fall in battle this night, and the Chosen One will take the Dark One's power as his own. Harry stood in wide-eyed horror as the words of the prophecy echoed in the great hall. Throughout the student body, and in fact even among the teachers a cheer went up. The time for fear was almost over. All around him the young men high-fived each other in celebration for the impending end of the Dark Lord, and the girls were similarly excited, with now more than just the Gryffindors eyeing him expectantly. But Harry knew better as he eased from his seat, his meal forgotten. He had been Fate's bitch far too long not to recognize the danger. The wizard raised in the school hadn't yet seen the problem, but some of the muggle-raised males in the Great Hall were starting to let their common sense overrule their joy at the news that the Dark Lord was doomed. Harry noticed a few eyes narrow as they sought him out, a few hands start their way to their wands. Harry swallowed and exited the Great Hall as quickly as he could. Racing to his dormitory, Harry threw his things into his trunk, shrinking it as soon as the lid closed. Pocketing the trunk, Harry opened the window and mounted his broom just as the screams of rage started making their way up the stairs from the Gryffindor common room. Harry kicked free of gravity's restraints and rocketed out the window running for his life. Harry happened to look down as he was passing over the Forbidden Forest and saw that Voldemort was already in the clearing where they had agreed to meet. An hour early, setting up some sort of trap probably. Harry hesitated. The bastard deserved what was coming. But he couldn't do that. Not even to Voldemort. "Tom!" Harry called out as he landed. "Potter!" Voldemort exclaimed, somewhat embarrassed he had been caught, and then realizing how the boy had addressed him, he rose to his full height and proclaimed, "I am Lord Voldemort." "Yeah, Tom, I know. Look, that's for the sheep, okay? Not for between us. Look, something horrible has happened. There's been another prophecy." "Another prophecy?" Voldemort gasped, recalling the pain the previous one had caused him. "What does it say?" "I don't remember the exact wording," Harry said, shaking his head, "but the gist of it is that there's going to be a fight tonight, a fight that you lose." "Of course, Potter, if we fight, you kill me," Voldemort scoffed. "That's why you're warning me." "I'm not warning you for your sake, old man," Harry spat. "It's for MY's sake. The aftermath of tonight's fight is the problem. According to that idiot third year, when you die, I'm going to somehow end up absorbing all your magic and knowledge, becoming the most powerful wizard the world has ever known. There will be something in that level of power that will bind ever which to me forever. Harry's expression took on an even more haunted look. Voldemort blinked. And how is this bad? Oh, come on, Tom. Harry exclaimed, incredulous that the man hadn't figured it out. Think back to when you were in school and still had your balls. What would you have done to anyone that had ensured that you would never get laid? Ever. I'd have murdered the bast. A look of realization washed over the Dark Lord's serpent-like features. Oh, I see. So why did you stop to warn me? Because the stupid prophecy didn't say that I was going to be the one to kill you. I was there, Tom. I saw their faces. They believe this crap. Voldemort's snake-like features shaped themselves into a puzzled expression. You don't. Of course I don't. Harry all but screamed at the reigning Dark Lord. Prophecies are stupid. Do a little fucking research. The only prophecies that have ever turned out to be true did so because they had a bunch of idiots behind them making them come true. You and Dumbledore come to mind for that first one concerning you and me. But if you don't believe it, it doesn't matter what I believe, Harry said, trying to calm himself down. Panic would only serve to get him killed. I was in the Great Hall when the prophecy was made, and I saw them all listening to it and believing it. I saw people who have told me time and again that prophecy was so much nonsense, listen and believe. I saw the girl who I thought was the most cynical about prophecy decide to believe it. I got out of there before the boys figured out what that prophecy was going to cost them. The prophecy didn't say you and I were going to fight, only that you would fall in battle tonight. But the pure-blood sheep don't put all that much effort into thinking things through. What if they haven't figured that out and decide that the new prophecy means I have to kill you, and they go on to figure that the best way to ensure that I don't kill you and get all the women is to have someone else do it? Run, man, run hard, run long, and don't look back. Harry swung his leg over his waiting broom. That's what I'm doing. With that, the boy kicked free of the ground and vanished into the night. The Dark Lord stood and watched open-mouthed as his hated rival disappeared into the dark, cloudless sky. That poor bastard. Voldemort then turned to take his own leave, considering that he should probably heed the boy's warning. Where is he? A voice said from over his shoulder. Voldemort turned to find himself surrounded by almost 300 young boys, all with their wands drawn. The Dark Lord spent a moment remembering what he had been like at that age, and his mouth went very dry. Potter is gone. You let him get away? An enraged Draco Malfoy asked. You had him here, and let him get away. We're all in this together, lads. Ron Weasley proclaimed from beside the Slytherin prince. Let's show this wanker what we do to collaborators. Harry was high over the English Channel when the first burst of Tom's magic hit him. He felt his reserves fill to bursting, expand, and refill over and over until he almost fell from his speeding broom. Ah, Tom, you stupid bastard, he gasped as he struggled to remain astride his broom. I told you to run. 4 days later, Luna Lovegood slid into a seat at the Hufflepuff table, a seat directly across from third-year Muggleborn Hufflepuff Gordon Cooper. The third year looked up from his oatmeal and grinned. Good morning, Luna. Luna sighed. Good morning, Gordon. You in the bed. She slid the 10 galleon coins across the table to the grinning boy. Cool. The boy's grin got wider. This will come in handy for the Hogsmeade weekend. I should be angry with you, Luna said petulantly. I have my campaign for the seduction of Harry Potter all planned out for this year. Hey, I never expected that Harry would run off like that. The Hufflepuff laughed. I thought he'd just hide out until everyone calmed down. Besides, it was you that said that only Harry could deal with that Voldemort bloke. All I did was provide enough motivation to get everyone off their duffs and push them to deal with the idiot. Luna shook her head. I thought surely that if they weren't willing to fight to save their lives. Sex is a major motivator for most lads, Luna, Gordon said, returning to his breakfast. My dad works in advertising and he uses sex to sell almost everything. So when I made the suggestion that if Harry killed Voldemort, then he'd get all the women and all the other lads would have to turn to their own hands or each other, the Voldemort was toast. But that's not what you said, Gordon, Luna corrected him. You just said that Voldemort would fall in battle, not that Harry was going to kill him. And he did. Since you made your prediction, I've noticed that most, if not all, of the established couples among the students have broken up, and that all most of the girls are willing to talk about is Harry. Really? The Hufflepuff stopped eating again. I wonder if enough people believe my little prophecy would provide the magic needed to make it come true. Interesting. You had best hope that's not what has happened, Gordon, Luna said as she stood from the table. Because if of the prophecy you made to win our bet ends up forcing me to share Harry Potter with even a single other witch, I'm going to kill you. Gordon Cooper stared open-mouthed at the young woman as she walked away. Lily got her gun. A/N. I do not own Harry Potter, nor any of the other characters or situations associated with Harry Potter. But you knew that. Lily got her gun. The heavy weapon seemed cool to her touch. It took both hands to hold the pistol on the target, and even then she could see that her aim was far from steady. Just like that, Toots, her father said quietly from where he stood behind her. Don't worry about holding the weapon steady. That will come when you get stronger. Just squeeze the trigger, that's my girl. The girl jerked on the trigger like she had seen people on television do. Click. Not like that, Toots, Tony Evans said as he gently reached around his youngest daughter to pull the hammer back on the unloaded pistol, while keeping it pointed down range. Squeeze slowly and gently. When the hammer falls, it should surprise you. Now, try again. Daddy, this is boring. 15-year-old Petunia whined from where she sat on watching her sister's lesson. Aggie and Jen are having a party, and I'm stuck here. There will always be another party, Pet, the elder Evan said in that quiet way of his. The time I can spend with my girls teaching them to take care of themselves is precious to me. Today we are doing this together. He turned his attention back to Lily. Again, Toots, squeeze slowly this time. 12-year-old Lily nodded and again tried to steady the pistol on the target and slowly increase the pressure on the trigger. Click! The sound of the hammer falling caused her to jump a bit. Surprised you that time, didn't it, Toots? Her father asked. Lily nodded her answer. Are we done yet? Petunia whined again. This is stupid. When will I ever need a gun? Pet, Tony said with a glare. You bloody well know what happened to Mrs. Gavin down the far end of Spinner's End last month. I didn't get my bloody arse shot off at the Suez so that something like that could happen to my daughters at home. The two of you are learning to defend yourselves, and that's final. It was probably Lily's freaky friend what did it. Petunia groused. He's always skulking about. He even lives down next to old lady Gavin. It was not Severus, Lily protested. It wasn't Daddy. Severus was with me at Hogwarts then. Don't let Pet get to you, Toots, Tony said. She has important teenage things to do and doesn't think it's fair she's stuck her with me and you. Now then, you've kept your weapon pointed down range this whole time, Pet, and I were talking, and that's good. Now then, I want you to squeeze off a few more dry fires, and then I'll teach you how to clean the weapon. The targets weren't bulleyes anymore, 15-year-old Lily Evans noted as she took aim and fired her father's Browning high-power pistol. The round went wide, perforating the target above and to the left of the human silhouette's shoulder. Either you have gotten quite rusty since last summer, or you aren't trying to kill him, her father noted dryly. I don't know if I could shoot a man, Lily said in a quiet tone as she slipped off her protective ear muffs. This seems somehow wrong. Killing a man is always wrong, Toots, Tony Evans agreed. The only thing more wrong is allowing a man to kill you or someone you care about when you could have stopped him. But Daddy, she said. She laid the pistol down on the shooting table and turned to face her father. You don't. Tony raised his hand, cutting off Lily's protest. From the stories you've told me about your magical lot, there's a bastard with a small army out there killing people. People like you and your friends. Voldemort, Lily nodded. Stupid name, Tony sniffed. Sometimes I think that I should go recruit a few of the lads from 3rd Battalion and sort the bastards out. Daddy, fine. Tony smiled at his daughter's frustration with him. She was so like her mother. Suppose this Vold lad shows up and is set on killing your werewolf friend Remus. Remus. His name is Remus Lupin, Lily corrected. Of course it is. His name is Lupin, and he's a werewolf. Daddy. Yes, Toots, so this terrorist is going to kill your friend. Do you try and talk him out of it? Or do you defend your friend Remus? Of course I'd defend Remus. Lily huffed. Of course you would. You're my daughter after all. From what you've told me, the use of magic involves both talent and study. All the reports from that school of yours tell your mother and me that you are an extremely talented young woman. Do you think you could match this Voldefella in magic? No, Lily admitted. Well, there you go, Toots. You need an edge, and this old pistol can be your edge. until the terrorists are dealt with. I want you carrying this weapon everywhere you go. I know you've got storage in your things that will allow you to hide it. My old army piece could keep you alive." Lily was shocked by the tears she saw in her father's eyes and by the pleading tone of his voice. She turned back to the targets and picked up the Browning. She took careful aim and squeezed the trigger, just as her father had taught her. The round punched a hole in the center of the silhouette. "That's my girl," Tony Evans whispered behind her. 17-year-old Lily Evans stood, her head hanging as she found she couldn't look away from her parents' caskets as they were lowered into the dark earth. Petunia and her new husband Vernon stood at her side. Before it could register, the service was over and Lily was being consoled by the other mourners. And then she was alone in her parents' house with Petunia and Vernon. "Don't think you'll be moving back here after you're done with your freak school," Vernon growled. "We've seen the will. The house goes to Pet, and it will be sold right off. We found a nice home in a nice normal community, the kind of place your sort isn't welcome." "I've no intention of living anywhere near you, Vernon," Lily said, not really able to produce the indignant response the fat oaf deserved. "Though it might interest you to know that respecting a person's personal grief is a normal thing to do. We'll be putting the things they left you into storage." Petunia spat. "All right, and let you know where it is and what you'll owe." Lily sighed. "Did you wait until the doctors pronounced them dead, Pet? Or were you digging through Mum's jewelry as soon as you heard about the accident? Were you having the house appraised while they were still in the casualty ward? I'll leave with what I want to remember Mum and Daddy by. You can have the rest. We'll be watching to make sure you aren't stealing what is rightfully Pet's," Vernon threatened. That finally did it. The anger had finally burned through the grief. Lily's wand was in her hand, and Vernon Dursley found himself crushed against the wall by an invisible force. "Vernon, your tiny little mind isn't capable of understanding just what I can do to you. So I'm going to explain it in small words. Unless you want to spend the rest of your miserable, ignorant life as a small toad, you will never speak to me again." She stepped forward until she was eye to eye with the suspended fat man, while ignoring her screaming sister. "Do we understand each other, Vernon?" The fat man managed to nod, and Lily walked away. Vernon remained pressed to the wall until Lily had left the room. "Lily, take Harry and go. It's him. Go. Run. I'll hold him off." So, Potter thought he could defy the greatest Dark Lord in history yet again, this time without even a wand in his hand. Voldemort laughed before casting the curse. The green light pulsed, flooding the cramped hallway, the flash freezing everything around it, like a strobe. The pram, pushed against the wall, reflected the green light. The banisters glowed like the neon lights he recalled from his childhood in London before the war. And James Potter fell like a marionette whose strings were cut. Voldemort could hear the woman screaming from the upper floor, trapped. But as long as she was sensible, she at least had nothing to fear. He climbed the steps, listening with faint amusement to her attempts to barricade herself in. She had no one with her either. How stupid these two were, and how trusting, thinking that their safety lay in friends, that weapons could be discarded even for a moment. Voldemort forced the door open, moving the chair and boxes hastily piled against it with one lazy wave of his wand. And there she stood, the child in her arms. At the sight of him, she dropped her son into the cot behind her and threw her arms wide, as if this would help, as if in shielding him from sight, she hoped to be chosen. Instead, "Not Harry, not Harry, please not Harry. Stand aside, you silly girls, stand aside now. Not Harry, please no. Take me, kill me instead." She pleaded, "This is my last warning." A smile stretched across Voldemort's face when he saw the woman's resolve break. Like so many before her, he watched as her shoulders slumped and her proud head lowered in submission. Severus would so enjoy his reward. "Please," she whispered while moving aside. The child had not cried all this time. He stood, clutching the bars of his cot, and he looked up into the stranger's face with a kind of bright interest, perhaps thinking that it was his father who hid beneath the cloak making more pretty lights, and his mother would at any moment resume her laughing teasing. The Dark Lord pointed the wand very carefully into the boy's face. He wanted to see it happen, the destruction of this one inexplicable danger. The boy began to cry. He had realized that this stranger was not James. Voldemort did not like the crying. He had never been able to bear the small ones whining back at the orphanage. It was time to stop the crying, to end this absurd threat. Voldemort raised his wand. Ava. Voldemort's last sensation was the feeling of a bee sting behind his left ear. As Lily Potter emptied her father's Browning high-power pistols, 13-round magazine, into his head and chest, just as Anthony Evans had taught both his daughters all those years before. In a smooth motion, she ejected the spent magazine and inserted one of the two reserve magazines she had been carrying in her robes since the Potters had fled under the Fidelius. She dropped the slide and scooped up the Dark Lord's wand. The loud cracks of the pistol firing had startled young Harry out of his tears, but the sounds did not frighten him. No child who had successfully survived 15 months in the company of James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew would be frightened by a mere explosion. No, loud noises like that meant that fun things were about to happen. Lily waved her captured wand a few times and got nothing from it. Of course not, she thought. Her own wand was in the kitchen, but no force on earth could make her leave this room until help arrived. Lily tossed the wand aside, not seeing or caring where it landed. She settled herself onto the floor facing the door, her father's pistol still in her hand with the hammer back and the safety off. The thrown wand bounced off the wall and arced into the boy's cot. Harry's green eyes grew wide in excitement. A light stick. Harry picked up the wand using both of his chubby hands. This wasn't Mum's light stick. It wasn't Da's either. It was different than Pafuz and Mois and Wormies. It looked like the light stick the scary man had held. Had he come to bring Harry his own light stick? Unnoticed by his near-hysterical mother, Harry waved the wand over a small arc and was rewarded by a shower of silent golden sparks. That was funny. Lily twitched slightly at the sound of her son's giggles. Sirius, please come. James said you might come over tonight. Please come help me. She screamed inside her mind. Outside the cottage, Peter Pettigrew cowered behind a tree. He had seen the Dark Lord enter the home of his best friends in the world, because he had betrayed them to him. Self-loathing filled his soul as he sobbed in regret for what he had done. But really, he hadn't had a choice. No one could deny the Dark Lord. No one. Peter had tried to resist. Really, he had. Lasted almost 2 days before he gave the Dark Lord what he wanted. In doing so, he had doomed James, Sweet Lily, and little Harry. He cringed as he heard James screaming for Lily to take Harry and run. He saw the flash of green light that had ended James' life. There was silence for a few seconds, and then the Dark Lord's laughter issued from the upstairs window that Peter knew opened into Harry's room. Lily's pleading for Harry's life reached him as well. Then there were more than a dozen unexplained cracks, like a string of fireworks. Then nothing. Peter had waited 10 minutes now, and there was no sign of the Dark Lord, none at all. He summoned what little courage he possessed and slowly made his way to the shattered door of the cottage, wondering why the Hat had ever thought he should be in Gryffindor. He found James in the shattered living room, the dead man's eyes open and staring into nothing. Peter knelt next to his old friend and gently closed those eyes while real tears ran down his own cheeks. "I'm sorry, James. I'm so sorry," he sobbed, silently cursing his own cowardice. Peter rose to his feet and ascended the stairs silently, heading toward Harry's room. Arriving on the landing, he could see that the door to Harry's room was open. Using his marauder-taught stealth, he approached the doorway and stepped silently into the room, to find he was staring down the barrel of Lily's pistol. "Lily, it's me, Peter." "Peter?" the hysterical woman asked. "Peter, thank God." She rose from the floor in that fluid grace of hers and rushed to envelope her friend in a hug. "You got to help me protect Harry." Peter was amazed to find the Dark Lord's body lying lifeless on the floor and slightly sickened by the spray of blood and other bits of Voldemort's body that painted the floor and far wall. Lily released him and rushed to gather up a few items of Harry's clothing. "We got to get out of here. There's no way Voldemort would have come alone. There will be Death Eaters coming." She stopped grabbing at the baby clothes. "Voldemort broke the Fidelius," she reasoned. "But that's not possible. The only way he could have found us is if—" "Accio pistol," Peter spat, snatching the muggle weapon from the air as it arced toward him. "I'm sorry, Lily, but he captured me and did horrible things to me. He broke me." I was never strong like James and Sirius and Remus. You all knew that. This is really all James' fault, you know. If he had just used Sirius like we originally planned, none of this would have happened. But no, they had to be clever. Use Peter. No one would suspect that we trusted Peter. Peter, please. You're Harry's uncle in everything but blood. And I always will be Lily. I will have to disappear, but Sirius and Remus will raise him to be a next-generation marauder. But you know what I did. You're going to have to die. Peter, she screamed. Mum's screaming woke Harry from his dozing state. He looked up and saw Wormy. He could show Wormy his new light stick. What did big people call them? Wads. Harry stood up in his crib. Wormy, he laughed. Harry's voice startled Peter. He saw his almost nephew's smiling face, and his heart broke a little more. Hello, Harry. Why don't you lie down and take a nap? Wormy. Look. He raised the Uwad wand. Harry Wad. Peter's eyes widened at the sight of the infant holding the Dark Lord's wand. Harry, you need to give me that wand, Peter said as he reached for the wand that had killed and tortured so many. No, Harry screamed, backing away. It wasn't fair. Wormy had his wad. Why did he want to take Harry's wad? The boy pointed the wand at Peter as he had observed the adults using their own all his short life. Wormy, go away. It was Lily's turn to stare in open-mouthed amazement as a solid beam of golden energy lanced from the wand in Harry's grip too. Peter's chest, throwing the man across the room, impacting him hard enough into the wall to embed his body into the plaster. Both Peter's wand and Lily's pistol fell from the unconscious man's hands. Harry Wad, the little boy said. Mom, Wad. Lily rushed to her son and swept him into her arms. Yes, Harry's wand. Bloody hell. A familiar voice came from downstairs. Lily. Harry. Sirius Black screamed as he ran up the stairs to the second floor. And here's Sirius. Lily called. Still in his duty uniform, Sirius came through the doorway in a combat stance. The scion of the Black family stared open-mouthed at the cooling body of the Dark Lord. Then his eyes flicked to Peter's moaning form still embedded in the plaster. Padfoot. Harry called. Harry. Lily, I saw James and I was so. He wrapped the mother and son into a hug. Peter saved you, he asked incredulously. No, Peter betrayed us to Voldemort. Lily explained. I killed Voldemort, and then Peter came in. He was going to kill me to keep anyone from finding out what he had done. When Harry somehow got Voldemort's wand, and he... Harry Wad, the boy said proudly, waving it about, causing golden sparks to fly about the room. He can't do that, Sirius said, feeling stupid as he said it. He blasted Peter across the room. Lily noted. In theory, a child his age may not have a sufficiently developed core to power a wand, but in practice, Harry's wad works just fine. Harry Wad, the toddler agreed. Are you sure Peter won't wake up? Lily asked nervously as she draped a sheet over James' still form. No way in hell. I used a full aura lockdown on him. He's down for a week, if not given the proper potion, once he's in a cell. I'll make sure they know he's an animagus till he won't be getting out of the cell as a rat either. Sirius looked around the room, trying not to look down at his oldest friend. Have you got everything you need? It might be a few days before the crime scene types let you back in. I am never coming back here. She patted the pockets of her robes, feeling the shrunken fragments of her life, as well as her wand. She scooped a sleeping Harry into her arms. I'm ready. Are you finished upstairs? Yeah, I got photos of the crime scene, and then I went through Riddle's pockets for change. 3 galleons for sickles, and 2 nuts. Score! I know what you're doing, Sirius, but I don't think even you could cheer me up tonight. You can't blame an old dog for trying Lils. I'm just trying to keep from crying. Let's go. Together they exited the cottage and found Rebus Hagrid on the steps. Lily, the half-giant exclaimed. Think, Merlin, you're all right. Professor Dumbledore sent me to get Harry, to move him somewhere safe. Dumbledore sent you? Lily asked, puzzled by that information. How did he know that we would need help? And why didn't he come himself? Dunno, the half-giant shrugged. When the professor asks me to do summit, I do it. Great man, Dumbledore.